Right, welcome everyone. It's Sunday, which means it's Speedrunner Spotlight time. Woo! Exciting stuff. All right, welcome to the show, SBDWolf. Hello.
Thank you. I am indeed SBDWolf, as introduced. I don't even know how to describe myself. I run so many things at this point. Uh, let me go through a brief list. So I run. I guess I run. Okay, I started running like I guess we can go into it a little bit later. But I started running Pokemon Red and Blue. Then I started running Cuphead, Messenger. I guess various indie games. Then I started running some retro games like Castlevania. Then other Castlevania games. Then Donkey Kong Country 2. Other retro games, Lion King. Started running Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. Yeah, I have quite a few things. We'll go into a little bit of more detail later.
An extensive
Variety
list, I'd say.
speedrunner, I suppose.
Yeah, got a lot of work done. That's for sure. So, plenty to talk about here. So, um, yeah, we can start from the beginning, of course. So, what got you started here in speedrunning?
Right. So, what got me interested in speedrunning in the first place was finding GDQ videos on YouTube. So that must have been around 2014 or 2015. Um, and I had no idea what speedrunning was to it prior. Probably got it in my YouTube recommendation at some point and was like, "Ooh, this! I know this game. Let's watch it." And then got immediately mind blown at what people were able to do in these games that I was like very familiar with. And so obviously I ended up going on a binge watch of like all the games that I really liked and seeing all the ways that like people could absolutely break them and just like be extremely good at them otherwise. Um, that went up for a while. Then eventually I saw a run of Verster at AGDQ, don't remember, probably 2014 of Pokemon Blue Any Percent No Safe Corruption, which is this glitched run. The route at the time involved skipping the first gym leader through a glitch. Then you go to Saffron City, you get an Abra that gets teleport, you do the Mew glitch to encounter a missing no twice, so that one of the items in your inventory becomes duplicated to 255 units, which you can then use to underflow your inventory count so that you can access other parts of memory, and then you can change the warp locations and warp to the end of the game. That was the run that made me say, that looks freaking cool. I want to do that. And I don't remember if I ended up like finding a guide or whatever, but I ended up just like imitating what I saw, did a few runs, got myself what seemed like a pretty good time. I'm not actually sure what my PB was, but I recently looked at my splits again, and the time said W split said that I had a 1738, and at the time the WR seemed like it was 1724.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that was my real PB because every split was a gold, so
Mm.
kind of taking that with a grain of salt. But I mean, I had fun with it. That was the bottom line. I ended up running right glitchless later. I didn't have as good of a time there. My split said I had a 209, with the WR being I think a high 14x. So yeah, I ended up having fun throughout like 2015 or 2016. Then ended up running some games for a while, and then in 2017, Cuphead came out, which was a game that I really really liked. I ended up like doing almost everything. I kind of almost ran out of things to do aside from getting all the S rings, which was really difficult and kind of didn't feel like doing. So eventually, I don't remember if I ended up getting into my YouTube recommendation or if I ended up just like searching for it. But I saw a speedrun by the Mexican runner of Cuphead. Um, and I was like, once again, that looks freaking cool. I want to do that. And ended up once again running Cuphead for some time. I ended up getting myself a Deathless run, which I think was some kind of low 27, with the world record being a high 24. And throughout all this time, I was not interacting with anyone online. I was just doing runs on my own, not even recording them most of the time, just literally for pure personal enjoyment. Then what ended up happening is that in December of that year, 2017, a patch came out that ended up fixing a lot of bugs that were relevant for speedruns. Most importantly, there was a bug slash exploit that it's the same exploit that exists in Contra 3, if anyone's familiar with it. Basically, you have two active weapons, but what ends up happening is that if you swap weapons, the cooldown for the inactive weapons keep counting down. So if you rapidly swap between weapons, you can essentially use both weapons at the same time, which essentially doubles your damage output. That ended up getting removed in that patch, and so what I ended up reading through like some online discussions that I could see on like SRC or YouTube or whatever, a lot of people were just saying this game is dead. Why did they fix it? This is unenjoyable, which is understandable. But I was a bit of a contrarian at the time, and I was like, surely this isn't dead. Surely you can still run this game. And I ended up dedicating about the next month to just kind of routing the game without with all the like fixed bugs and new updates. There weren't that many people running on the current patch, but there were a few, and I was getting a few inspiration from watching their live streams. But again, I was just like doing everything offline. Ended up bringing my time down, getting some like deathless runners close to deathless runs, and my time was getting pretty close to the world record, and I didn't want to stop running the game yet. I think around when I was like 1 or 2 minutes from the world record, I started actually recording my runs. And then in early February, I ended up like breaking what the world record on Speedrunner.com was. And so at the time, I was like, after several years of like just doing speedruns on my own personal pastime without ever like talking with anyone, I was like, do I do it? Do I finally like make a Discord account, a Speedrunner.com account, upload that onto YouTube, like say hi to people? Yeah, I was a bit hesitant, but I ended up like doing it. So that was basically the start of my journey. I ended up like finally like talking with people and about the game that I loved and other people loved as well. In retrospect, I'm half surprised but also glad that like people didn't reject my run immediately, because obviously if someone comes out of nowhere and uploads a world record as their first run without showing everything else, you start to have suspicions about it. But I guess at the time that category that I got into world record in wasn't as competitive as the run on the legacy patch, so that was probably a factor that went into it. So I ended up just getting my run accepted and starting to be able to talk to the world record holder and other runners. We ended up trading records for a while, for a few months. Later, I ended up getting the world record in what was the main category at the time for Cuphead, which was Legacy. I ended up getting the world record in all 28 categories eventually. At the time, there were quote-unquote only 28 categories. Now there's many more. I got the entire leaderboard sweep. Yeah, I had a lot of fun that year. That was basically my my breakthrough. That was when I had made a Twitch account and a Discord account and all of that. So it was a completely fresh experience, and it was extremely fun to interact with a lot of people that loved the same thing that I was doing and generally were extremely respectful towards each other. So that was it. And then I think around August of 2018. Prior to that, I think I ended up running more Red Glitchless. So I got like a sub 2-hour time in that game. But then, like in August of 2018, I played Castlevania 1 for the first time. And I don't know exactly what prompted me to do it, but I looked up what the speedrun looked like and was like, okay, this looks pretty cool. And then I think a few days later, I was like, let's try learning the run, just for fun. Obviously, it was like a fairly short game compared to what I was used to. But I thought it would be like a fun novelty to run something that was pretty different from what I was normally used to. Ended up running Castlevania for a few weeks. I think the time that I ended up getting was a 1216. I was running on emulator at that point. I didn't have an NES at the time. And then I think one day I was practicing to cycle Dracula. and I broke my jump button on my Xbox One controller. So that kind of that forced me to stop speedrunning Cuphead, stop speedrunning Castlevania. I ended up running The Messenger for a bit, which is another indie game that came out in 2018 on keyboard, until I got a replacement controller. But I think by that time, I don't know why, but I decided that I wanted to get a console, so I ended up ordering that. Eventually, when I got my controller repaired, I ended up running Cuphead for a few more months. And then in January, I ended up getting an NES and an EverDrive and started taking Castlevania a bit more seriously. So starting from January, I brought my time down. I think I became a world record competitor in late February. And then ended up getting my first world record in 80% in April. And at the time, like, that was before the scroll glitch was found. That was when world records in Castlevania were extremely small. So I think my first record was by maybe 3 frames.
That's all you need.
So I got like a lower 1127. Brought my time down over the next few months to an 1126, then an 1125, and then an 1124. And at that time, I felt extremely proud of that run because being 3 seconds ahead in a game like that felt pretty significant. And after that, I ended up taking a bit of a break from speedrunning as actively because I had started university. Oh yeah, by the way, I was born in the year 2000, so 2017, 2018, I was 17, 18. And then in 2019, I ended up taking that slight break. I was still kind of doing runs here and there, but no longer with a webcam, no longer for like several hours in a row. And then I ended up starting having more time later. Started running more Castlevania 2 towards the end of 2019. I ended up getting the record in that game as well. After a couple months, that grind felt particularly difficult because that run is over 30 minutes long. There's a lot of RNG involved as well as a lot of difficult execution. So at the time, getting a world record at that game, you just have to accept that you're gonna miss a few things. And there's just gonna be some mistakes that are gonna immediately kill the run. It felt brutal. But eventually ended up getting a 3052 with a bunch of things that ended up lining up just right. After that, I ran Castlevania 2 100% for a bit, but I ended up learning Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Super Nintendo. I got myself a Super Famicom the year prior as well. I completely missed. I also ran Castlevania Dracula X in 2019 for a couple of weeks. Got the world record in that game as well. And also Castlevania 3. That was also in 2019. That's right.
World record in that too.
So I had the world record in the entire trilogy at the time, in the entire NES trilogy for Castlevania.
Have so many you forgot about some of them.
I suppose so. But yeah, 2020 I learned Donkey Kong Country 2, and that was my biggest challenge up until that point because the run was pretty long. The record was 38:28 at the time when I started learning the game. Very difficult and technical run with a lot of like movement optimizations. It's like if you're used to a lot of NES games, the movement is pretty simple. But in Donkey Kong Country 2, you roll and jump. Like you are able to save frames on almost every input that you make. So that feels a bit different. And on top of that, the game itself is pretty brutal because taking a hit in that game means that you lose a Kong and you have to play as the Kong that you don't want to play with. It typically loses several seconds. Deaths are common because you're having to do multiple inputs that come close to just killing the entire run. And yeah, that was particularly challenging. There was quite a big skill ceiling to climb in that game. That's for sure. Like I could feel myself practicing, and then several months later, continuing to practice and still feeling like I could save a lot more time if I kept practicing. So that was definitely a new experience for me at the time. And then I ended up making things harder for myself after a couple months when I found a real-time viable setup for a wrong warp that was previously thought to be TAS only. So that game has several wrong warps to finish a level early. So they're not wrong warps to like skip a part of the game or whatever. They're wrong warps to finish a level early. You take an invisible object. If you're familiar with like Super Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time, it's the same glitch. It's basically like a stale referenced object where you're holding an object that no longer exists. So you're essentially holding a pointer to an area of memory that can be filled by other objects. And what you can do is you can load a warp barrel in your hands, throw it, and then if you enter it, it triggers a failsafe that exits the level because it something. I don't know the details, but
As long as it works.
yeah. I found a wrong warp in a level called Gusty Glade, or rather an RTA setup for a wrong warp in Gusty Glade that had a known wrong warp. It only saved a few seconds, up to 5, but and it was really difficult. Basically, like I was very hesitant at first. I think it took me a month to decide to start implementing this in my runs, but after practice, I ended up having roughly a 20% consistency at it. So grinding with that wrong warp ended up developing into get a few runs going. It's already really difficult to get a runs past the early game and then the mid game, and then you get to this level, which is 27, no, roughly 25 minutes into the run. And then you just lose like 4 runs out of 5. And yeah, that felt like bashing my head against the wall a bit. You just end up running the game for several weeks in a row and just feel like you're not making any progress. That was another new experience for me. I think for one time, for a few weeks, I ended up deciding to take that wrong warp out of my runs, and then I ended up PBing very quickly. So that was definitely like slowing down my progress. I ended up taking a break from Donkey Country 2 at some point to run in the Big 20 that year, which was another new experience of mine, and another really fun experience, but also an extremely exhausting experience. The Big 20, for those who aren't familiar, though it's been mentioned on this podcast, I'm sure, is this event hosted by Best of NES, where they take 20 games that get revealed on a specific date, and they announce 20 goals to achieve in those 20 games. And then you have a little over a month of time, usually, to practice those 20 games. And then at the end of it, they host a race, and then you have a placement depending on how you place on the race. So it's learning 20 speedruns essentially in like 5 weeks is a tall order. For me, it definitely ended up being very tight because most speedruns I didn't know. Castlevania was one of the games that was basically the only freebie for me. And I don't think I ended up doing too poorly. I ended up placing 26th out of about 100 participants. I ended up having a rough moment during that specific race where Metroid was one of the games, and the goal was to get 6 energy tanks, and essentially you had to do it was on the table to do crate first, which is basically like the optimal speedrunning route for any percent and other categories, where you come in with low health, you do this really difficult screen wrap where you can soft lock, and then you come into Crate's room, and you hope you just don't take too many hits or like fall in the lava, otherwise it's over and you lose over a minute. I took the chance and I went for that route. It went pretty well in practice overall. Then come race day and I just fail it over and over and over and over and over, and I just tilt, and I lost about 10 minutes on Metroid. So that was rough, but I think I'm pretty happy with my overall performance outside of that specific game. So that ended up being an experience for sure. Because at the time, like the way I ended up running games was be really focused on a game and like really take the time to optimize however time I need to optimize whichever segment of a run without needing to worry about any time pressure. But what the Big 20 brings is time pressure. Like you gotta bring some results, and you only have so much time, so you gotta choose some sacrifices. Essentially, you're not gonna be able to study every element of a run up close. So that was definitely like a skill that I needed to pick up for that Pick 20. And I don't think I did a great job at everything, but it was definitely a learning experience. And after the 20 was over, I kept running more Donkey Kong Country 2 for a few months. And then in December, in what I called a Christmas miracle at the time, because it happened on December 24th, I ended up getting the world record finally with the wrong warp in it. It was a 38:14, with the previous record being a 38:18. So that was great. That was basically the end of a 10-month grind, which felt extremely good. And that was the end of 2020, pretty much. By that time, I lost the record in CV1 to Tuznek, and more people had come back to Castlevania because at the time there was a race for the sub 1120. The record in December of 2020 was an 1122, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was an 1122. And K-Mac had come back after like a several-year retirement, which was very exciting. Like basically a GOAT. There was this new runner called Evade Captcha that was getting top times and very close to the record. Tuznek was still doing runs. And I just felt like it would have been a missed opportunity if I hadn't joined back in the fray. So we had this like extremely exciting like 4-way chase for the record, where like 4 top runners actively like went after this world record, and we ended up setting a lot of world records in the following months, like between Tuznek, between K-Mac, Evade Captcha, and myself. So K-Mac got an 1121 on the 1st of January of next year, 2021. Evade Captcha got a couple records after that, a couple lower 1121s. Then K-Mac got a high 1120. And I ended up getting a lower 1120 in, I think, late March. And then in late March, I got 1119. So that was great, because at that point that game was getting like pretty ridiculous with the amount of like frame perfect crap that we were throwing into the game, and other really complicated strats.
Yeah, that's a close fight. It's
Indeed,
really impressive.
That was probably the most competitive that record had felt for me, like up to this day. Just like 4 people actively running for it at the same time. Kept trying to lower it because there were still a few mistakes in that run. At the time, I thought like an 1118 would have been my goal, so just a second lower. A few weeks later, and actually, I've recently released a YouTube video, by the way, self-plug, just like going over the history of this discovery and like how this evolved over time. The scroll glitch got found. So we had known that the scroll glitch was a thing for TASes for about a year. In August of 2020, someone was messing around with using Turbo D-pad, and they noticed that like sometimes they would go forward and the level wouldn't load properly somehow. And then a tester named Scrimpus started like looking into it, and he was like, oh, the loading in this game is broken, and if you just go forward every other frame while the frame counter for the current room is odd, you don't load tiles. So that was fun, but that was TAS only, because you basically needed to do 31 frame taps in a row on the correct frame. So basically needed to win 30 coin flips in a row on top of doing 31 frame taps. That was not really viable. What ended up happening in April of 2021 was that someone by the name of Magos Fast was in level 3. He missed a Fleaman, so he kind of turned that on twice to kill it with a whip. And then he went forward, and one of the blocks just didn't seem to be loaded correctly somehow. Took a couple weeks for me to get around to this, but I ended up analyzing his video and replicating it frame by frame in a TAS, and I just like got the glitch to be replicated immediately. So I kind of showed it to Scrimpe and Challenger. We got it to work with like just a couple 1-frame taps, and then Scrimpe realized that the loading is broken in 2 ways. So not only if you just go forward every other frame, you can break the loading, but also since the game splits chunks in columns into 6 chunks, and it loads these chunks one by one. What ends up happening is every 2 frames it decides to load a chunk, But if on the frame that it decides to load a specific jump, a specific chunk, you turn around instead of going forward, the game loads a tile set in the other direction instead of the direction where you're going towards. But it still assumes that that completed like correctly as it should, and it still assumes that you're loading the column forward and you're moving to the next chunk. So you can keep going forward with like the glitch tile, and that will remain glitched. Although there are multiple passes that get done on the same column as you go forward, so you need to do more than one turn around. But after you do enough, then that tile stays glitched, and that's a lot simpler than simply doing 31 frame taps. You just have to turn back 2 or 3 times depending on the tile that you're trying to manipulate, and then you get it. Although initially, what we thought, what we knew was that the optimal task method to do it was simply turn around twice by 1 frame on the correct frame. But that was like really difficult to do, and also varied depending on how the room went, because that depended on the frame counter for the current room. And then if you had any variance, like jumped a frame later past a corner or whatever, then that changes the frame where you have to turn around. So I ended up developing some setups that made it more consistent. Long story short, you can turn around by 2 frames or 4 frames to make it so that it's independent from the frame counter. I used whip buffers, I used jumping setups to make some movements consistent, and then that trick ended up being more viable. I ended up implementing 2 scroll glitches. I lowered the record to an 11:05, so that was like a 14 seconds time save over the previous record. I stopped running the game after that, even though the sub 11 was closed, because I was just kind of getting a bit burnt out of running Castlevania for like 5 or 6 months. And like the time saves that felt realistic at the time with the setup that I was going for weren't like that many left. So I ended up taking a break from that. I got the record back in Castlevania 3, which I had also lost. I got the first sub 15 in that game. Then let's see, that must have been June. What did I do in July? Oh yeah, I ran 102% in Donkey Kong Country 2. I got myself like a 128, which was like top 10 at the time, I think. I ran the NES Dragon Slayer, which was
Oh God.
not fun.
Oh no.
It was a meme in my channel because I played the game on stream before. It was a hair-tearing experience, to say the least. It just like the game gives you many misdirections into like how you should play it, and it likes to just like kill in one hit and have you go back at the very start of the game, just like an extremely frustrating experience. I ended up being with the game with save states the first time. But then people wanted me to speedrun it. I put a channel point reward for 10 million channel points. Nobody redeemed it. But then on April 1st, on April Fools of 2021, I thought it would be funny to run it. I got like a high 7-minute time with record being 7:21. And then a few months later, I said, you know what would be funnier if I actually tried to go for the world record here? That was a joke that lasted too long. Yeah, no, that grind was a bit miserable. Not because of the game itself. Most of the run was fine, despite how unresponsive the game is. The final boss was extremely frustrating because Singe, which is the final boss of Dragon Slayer, is this boss fight where you can only hit him if he gives you low puffs, and he can either give you low puffs or high puffs. We're talking about like smoke puffs. And if he hits you with any of those, by the way, and you make an input mistake, you are dead on the spot. And ideally, I think at the time with the strat I was doing, I needed to rely on getting something like 8 low puffs, and it's like a flip of a coin, like a 50% each. So a lot of runs just get to Singe, and then they just don't get good enough luck since every puff loses 4 seconds. That was extremely miserable. There was a couple runs where I almost got the really good luck. I killed Singe, and then I got killed by a puff that was lingering on screen. Yeah, okay. That was the worst game that I had granted till that point. So once that was done, I started learning the Lion King for the SNES. That was a fun run. About a 12-minute run. The world record at the time was at 12:09. So I learned the game in a few days, and I think I got the world record in a couple weeks, and which was like a 12:09. Kept running the game for the past couple months, and I brought the time down to an 11:55, which is the current world record to this day. That's a record that I still have for now, although there's a few people that could probably get it soon-ish.
Nothing's ever
Potentially.
safe.
Indeed. I mean, Bronco, who's currently right here on the broadcast, has an 11:58. He can do it.
Ooh, yeah,
Just saying.
the competition.
Although that run, admittedly, that run has basically boiled down to a specific RNG spot. There's this point where you have to wait for some geysers to erupt, and since you have to wait for them to erupt in order, and the way you progress to that level is when the geyser on the left erupts 5 times, you can do a setup to manipulate the geysers to erupt in an order that they weren't intended to erupt in, and you have a chance. You create a chance, which is random, for the left geyser to erupt first, or the second from the left to erupt first, and both save time. The second to the left saves 3.5 seconds, and the one on the very left saves 7. My run of Lion King is like very clean in terms of execution. Like there's basically just like a handful of mistakes that lose just like half a second or something. Although there are a few new strats now that save more time over that. But the bottom line is like basically you kind of need good geyser RNG, or you need the worst RNG and then like pop off in terms of execution. So that has become a bit of an unfun grind on its own, because it has become a bit of an RNG grind. You get a good run going, then you get to the geysers, and then you get the worst RNG, and that's ripped the run completely outside of your control. That's one thing that I've kind of noticed around speedruns. I feel like there's like good kinds of RNG and bad kinds of RNG, like stuff that can make the run more fun and stuff that makes the run less fun. It's not just that like all RNG is bad. I don't believe that. I think there's RNG. I think if RNG can make the run more dynamic, make it feel like not every playthrough is the same, without it feeling like you're necessarily relying on getting specific kinds of luck, then I think RNG can be a good thing to add to a run. But if it's just like a binary, you get to a certain point and then, oh no, I didn't get the pattern I wanted, I guess the run is dead. That is not very fun, because it just feels like there's not much that's in your control at that point. Mm-hmm. Like all that you can do is just keep doing more attempts, and who knows whenever you'll be done, because you're essentially relying on someone that isn't you to set you free. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would say that the geyser RNG is an example of a bad RNG for speedruns in Lion King.
What are like the chances of getting past the geysers?
Oh yeah, I didn't say that, did I? So it's a 50% chance to get the worst RNG, 25 to get second best, and 25% to get the best.
All right, well, at least it could be worse.
It could be worse, that is true.
But yeah,
the fun part is that game is almost fully RNG manipulable, because Lion King is one of those games that doesn't advance the RNG every frame. It only advances the RNG when it's needed by something. So I did route at some point a type of playthrough that can run through the game to normalize the amount of RNG calls that happen throughout the run. It almost works. Unfortunately, when you get to Simba's Exile, which is the 5th level, there's an amount of RNG calls that seems to vary depending on your exact pace as well. So that kind of killed it. Like that essentially made it unreliable.
Unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so ran the Lion King. Then I started running a game on Sega Genesis, which I don't think many people know, but it's called Donald the Maui Mallard, or it's also known by the name of My Mallard in Cold Shadow. That was a game. That was one of the what I considered one of the few good games that I played as a child. My mom had bought it for me at the local store. And I had the PC the PC version. Really enjoyed it. And then went back to it. The original version was the Sega Genesis version. And so I joined that game briefly, actually, in 2019. That's another thing I forgot to mention. For a couple weeks. And what I found interesting is that at the time, nobody had done a run of that game. That was an unrotted game, pretty much. So people had okay. So that's a game that came out in Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and PC. The Super Nintendo version had been run. In fact, Mecha Richter had the record at the time. But the Super Nintendo version is extremely different. It's like one of those scenarios where it's like the Genesis Aladdin versus the SNES Saladin. It's like same branding, but like you look at the game and it's like the physics are different. The themes stay similar, but like the level layouts are completely different. You obviously there's basically zero overlap. It's like a whole new game to route. So
Same name,
that
different
was like
game. That's what I call
exactly.
it.
Oh yeah, I guess like SMB2 in a way.
A little bit. We just refer to it as Lost Levels. So I mean, we changed the name for it.
The speedrunning community calls it by different names for sure. Yeah, that was a fun experience to just like take a game that was completely unrotted and just like rot it on myself. There was a task that was unfinished. That was my first reference, and allowed me to know about a bunch of glitches and skips that I wouldn't have found otherwise as easily. So I did my first route. Then someone else later in, I think, 2020 or early 2021 had started running the Genesis version and found more skips. And then I ran the game myself in 2021. Still one of my favorite runs to this day. That game, it takes a bit at first to get used to because it's one of those games where like you've gotten controls in the style of Lion King, where like you can do a neutral jump and then you can maneuver yourself slowly midair, or you can do a running jump and then it gives you a lot more momentum. And then there's like a few ways that you can get your inputs eaten, although in a pretty consistent way you can work around. But it feels extremely fluid once you get used to how the game works, and there's a lot of like extremely fast-paced attack and like inputs that requires me to do extremely weird grips to pull off. So that was an extremely interesting experience. Got the record on the Sega Genesis version down to 1325. Slightly after that, yeah, I believe I was at the beginning of 2022. I hosted an event around that game. I hosted like a sort of tournament. I threw in a bit of a prize pool, and I essentially encouraged people to start learning the game. So this prize pool would be available to people who had not run the game before. They would have 3 weeks of time to learn the game, and then the top 4 people who had the best time at the end of that would be able to face off in a first to 3 finals, and then they would place in like a specific order, and then I would distribute prizes depending on that. I ended up populating the boards with like I think 11 more people, which was
success.
A success up from the 2 that it had prior to that.
Yeah.
So
huge success.
Indeed. And yeah, it seems like more people ended up enjoying it. It seems like people overall told that they had fun with the game. A few more people kept running it a bit after that. So definitely had a lot of fun with that event. Wouldn't mind hosting something similar to that in the future if I ever get the kick. And that was also another new experience for me. I'd never hosted a type of event till that point and since. So very cool, very, very, very rewarding to see that kind of activity kind of happen. So that was the beginning of 2022. What did I do after that? Soon after that, I started running game. Okay, I ran the PC version of My Melord a bit more. I brought the time down on that as well. Then in February, 2 things. I started learning the game Gimmick on Famicom. And I had also done a 12-hour challenge of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. So 12-hour challenges is this event that it's no longer regularly happening. I think that event is a bit in limbo right now, but it was this thing where kind of a community event where anybody would be free to do this individually on their own, but you would have essentially a weekend, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to run a game for 12 hours. And that was kind of it. Like the rules past that were a bit freestyle. So just an encouragement to like try new games and stuff. So I'd been doing that for that was my second 12-hour challenge. The first one I'd done the year prior for Super Ghouls and Ghosts. And I had a lot of fun with that speedrun. So Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, they're essentially like roguelike dungeon crawlers where the exit to each floor is, well, not just the exit, the entire floor is like randomized. So it's like what you would call nowadays a procedurally generated game. And so obviously that's a game with a lot of randomness, but at the same time, it's a type of run where there is still a lot of player execution and strategizing involved. So that felt extremely unique and interesting to me, because obviously, like when people think about games that are having on RNG, they don't think about the ways that they can try and work around it. But that game felt extremely deep in how you would be able to work around it. So you would essentially have to come up with like a general strategy to be able to handle whatever the game could potentially throw at you, and then just kind of roll with that. I ended up running the game a lot more after that 12-hour challenge. And then I ended up running the entire Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series. So I kind of run those games a lot at this point. But that's how it started. It was also the first time I ever ran a DS game, which was another pretty unique thing. I ended up getting a 3DS capture card right here.
Yeah. I still need to get one.
So yeah, one thing that I ended up like enjoying a lot during the years, and like I hope to continue doing, is just like experiencing different types of speedruns. It's like I started out as like the type of person who would like mostly run one single game for like a year and just like mostly really try to optimize one specific thing. And nowadays, like I do like my longer grinds. Like currently, as we're speaking, I'm basically a 1 year grind for Castlevania, but I do like to just kind of explore other games that are in a completely different style, because I think that's really interesting. One thing that I really like about speedruns is just like how rich the entire like scene is in terms of like the different variety of runs, the different communities that form around them. I think that's one of the more interesting aspects. Is just how each game just kind of feels unique on its own rights. And also, I feel like it helps you learn more as I pick up more games that work differently. There's like more things that I can apply to the games that I already know, and more like practice styles of analyzing a run, testing things, and so on. So yeah, that's kind of been what I've been trying to do. So I kept running Gimmick a lot in 2022. I got my time down to a 901 for best ending. The world record being an 844. Then what ended up happening in I think it was the 30th of June. The DLC for Cuphead came out, which was essentially an extra aisle with more bosses and more stuff to do. I ended up running the basically like DLC involved runs for Cuphead for a few months. It was really fun to route a game that had just come out pretty much, and just like worked with other top runners who had experience with Cuphead, other friends of mine and so on. Got a few records that stood for some time, and then they all got beaten. I ran 300% briefly, but like that's one category that I want to come back to. Like that's probably the run that I want to do the most whenever I return to Cuphead. It might be my favorite category. Yeah, 300%. It's basically
that 100 with every character or something.
It is 100% on expert mode, and you do both the base game plus the DLC. So it's about an hour long.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah, with Cuphead being like pretty RNG heavy, so you have a lot of like boss patterns to study and being like, what if this boss does that, and what if it does that other thing, and it being just like extremely like technically difficult to execute everything. That is one of the most challenging runs that I've ever done. My current PB has a couple deaths in it still. I would love to eventually get like a good run of that category. That's something that I could see myself being extremely proud of, like extremely rewarded by. But that's for the far future still. Probably the run that I had the most fun with, anyhow. That year when I ran Cuphead. After that, I ran more Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. I got the world record in the category that I was running, which was 80% with Wondermail. In early 2023, I had. Oh yeah, also later that year, I had started working on like cutsceneless hacks because those games have a lot of unskippable cutscenes. And one thing that I picked up in 2021 also was like ROM hacking capabilities. So I kind of learned to like program in assembly, just hack a game, reverse engineer, and all that stuff. So I ended up developing a whole bunch of practice hacks for a few of the games I've run. And one thing I've done for the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games is just hacks that remove all the cutscenes. So they can bring the run time the time of the run down depending on the game from like either an hour down into like potentially like 4 hours cut from the run on
Oh,
some games. So they've been extremely helpful for like being able to route games more quickly, race things a lot more practically, being able to get more practice, more run experience more quickly, and so on. So pretty happy that I've done that. I've made them for almost the entire series at this point. I ran another Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game early in 2023, which was Gates to Infinity, which is the game where the cutscenes cut out 4 hours of time. One good thing about it, though, is that when you am running on the vanilla unmodified game, since the cutscenes are so long, the good thing is that for text in all the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, you can just hold B to automatically advance the text instead of having to mesh. What that gives you time to do is to take a clothespin or any kind of clamp. You just clamp the B button down, and then you have like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes of free time to do whatever you want. And I typically have used that time either to like program practice hacks for other games or just to practice other games. So
that's really fun.
those games have been like a great source of let's call it time optimizations, where like I would run those games to get a time, but also start to prepare my next grind. So
You're optimizing time for optimizing time.
yeah, speedrunning the speedruns.
Yep.
So yeah, that's been that's been one interesting thing about running those games. It just feels like I can sit down and like just do some like staggered practice here and there. After that, I went back to Castlevania, which is the game that I'm running to this game, to the game that I'm running to this day. So scroll glitches have been found. JC in 2022 returned to Castlevania, and he was like, "Why are you all doing this like slow setup with whip buffers that improve consistency and make the run kind of fun? Why don't we just like hold forward and like tap the D-pad backwards within a rhythm and make this really hard?" And then he was like, "Yeah, let's go for like 6 of these scroll glitches," and then he got like 5 of them in a run, and now the record is a 10:45. And I've been trying to I've been on a world record grind for a year, and I still haven't gotten it.
Mm-hmm.
That has been my toughest grind so far, bar none. So basically, every scroll glitch is like really difficult. I've practiced them a lot at this point. My consistency, I don't think, is like too terrible. On a good day, I can have like a 50% consistency on an individual scroll glitch. But the fact that there's like basically 8 of them individually, because there's like 6 that we're attempting, but 2 of them are made up by 2 individual tile sets, so essentially it's 8. That makes it really difficult to have the one run lineup that gets them all, which is almost required for the record at this point. Trisk has also been on a world record grind for a couple years at this point. He has a PB that is 1 second faster than mine. Still at it. This is an extremely difficult run. It's just incredible what it's evolved to at this point. And it's been my most challenging thing. Not just in terms of like technically difficult to like get, but also in terms of like motivation, just because it feels like you're like running the game and you're like, oh boy, I can't wait to find out which scroll glitch kills the run this time. So one thing that this grind has made me learn is like take more breaks, because it really does feel like I'm traveling more towards like a sense of learned helplessness if I just um do the same thing and don't really seem to make any progress for like several weeks. So I think it has been a good thing to be like, okay, let's just like take a break, don't think about this game for a bit, run this other thing for like a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever, and then like come back to Castlevania refreshed and like more highly motivated. So that's kind of been what I've been trying to apply to this grind. Just yesterday, I got my first world record pace to Dracula finally. Didn't get all the scroll glitch. I had gotten 1 second try on the second try, which lost 6 seconds, but it was still barely a record pace. Unfortunately, missed the 2 cycle, but that is finally something that I see as progress. It's a good thing that it happened on like a barely pace instead of like the god pace that gets all these scroll glitches and looks really clean. So I'm feeling like a bit more highly motivated right now to continue grinding that and hope to get a run that I'm really happy with. So that's mostly what I've been doing the last year. I've also participated in another Big 20 during the summer. That time I had a bit more of a head start because I knew some runs a bit better thanks to the previous Big 20 in 2020. I ended up placing 5th, so that was pretty good. That ended up being, I think, to this day, the closest Big 20 ever. Because the stream had a feed for the top 6 runners, and like all 6 runners ended up starting the last game, which was Zelda 1, within a few minutes of each other. That was pretty incredible. So
Wow. That is quite crazy because that's
indeed,
like many hours into it, and
yeah. The Big 20 itself was around a 3-hour run, basically. After a month of practice, we're like, obviously each person is gonna have a different head start. Like there's Prezi, who has a lot of Mega Man experience and like is gonna be the guy who's gonna beat everyone by 30 seconds. Then there's gonna be Lack Attack, who just smokes everybody in Zelda 1. There's me, who beat everybody in Castlevania by like 30 seconds, and so ended up being like a fun variety of things. One of the most fun things about the Big 20, I felt, was like just kind of helping each other out, because obviously we all were like experts of a different game. So it was like I'm up there being the one giving everybody advice about Castlevania, and then like I'm getting advice from the same person who I just helped from Zelda 1. So that felt like a nice bonding experience. Probably what made me have the most fun during the entire event. Not so much like the competition itself, but more like the fact that we were all working towards the same thing and just kind of helping each other out. And that is mostly that. Recently, one thing that I've been doing, I added a channel point reward. Since the 12-hour challenge isn't a regular thing anymore, I kind of gave it my own spin on it. I for 300,000 channel points, so that is quite expensive. But if somebody redeems it, I'll just run whatever game they want for 20 hours. So
20.
that involves,
Oh.
yeah, that's basically my 12-hour challenge, except people choose the game. So far, what I've run is like Psychonauts, which is, it was my second 3D run that I'd ever done. After Super Mario 64 16 star, which I'd done in a sort of 12-hour challenge also the year prior. So that felt like a unique experience on its own right. I hope to run more 3D games. That's one area where I'm kind of lacking in. I'm not good at moving around with an analog stick. That's like an extra thing to think about, like hitting the right angles and like managing your camera as you're like just slightly off on a specific direction or whatever. And then the second game that I've run, and the last one that I've run so far, is Cave Story, which is a game that I decided to run on keyboard. I ran the Messenger on keyboard several years ago, but that was like basically the longest I'd ever run a game on keyboard at this point. That also felt extremely fun and new. The world record holder for Historian, extremely like talented person. Like he knows how to. Well, first of all, he's like really proficient with the code of the game, but also he just like knows every single optimization about the game. It feels like. So that was like a quite fun to interact with him and other runners of the game. Periwinkle, I'm talking about Periwinkle. And yeah, other games that I've lined up that I haven't done yet are Battletoads, Kid Icarus, Ori in the Blind Forest, and a game that is still undecided, redeemed by Lucha Jim. He wants me to run either Dirty Harry or Magical Poppin for Super Famicom. One game is bad, the other one is good. I think it would be quite funny to pick the bad one, but after how Dragon Slayer went, I'm not sure it would be so funny. But I guess we'll see on that. And we're up to the present day, pretty much. I recently got a new record in Castlevania No Scroll Glitch, which is a category that got created after the Scroll Glitch got found. I've recently made a YouTube video, just kind of going over the history of how the Scroll Glitch got discovered and how the technique evolved over time. So I'm kind of starting to dabble with like YouTube content creation. I think my objective with that, like, I'm not gonna have like a regular upload schedule or whatever. I'm just gonna make an idea whenever I think I have something interesting that I want to talk about. But I think what I would be happy to do with it is to generally make things that get people to be interested, particularly if they wouldn't normally have an interest in the topic. I think that would be like a good goal of mine to do with my content. And I hope I hope to eventually be able to make you know, a substantial amount of YouTube videos that can fulfill that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. Currently going for Castlevania any percent. As far as what my future goes, the next thing I want to do is probably try to get the world recording gimmick. I am currently 2 seconds away. I have an 846 at this point. I did end up running the game a bit more last year and ended up taking my time down a bit more. After finding a manipulation for one of the bosses level 6, that made it a lot easier. Then I want to run a game called Wirlo on SNES, which is this game that hasn't been run too much, but there's a really talented Japanese runner called Leftover who has, and then also currently just gotten a lot of beast times in Donkey Kong Country 2, just like several dozens of seconds ahead of each other of everyone else. Then I want to run basically almost all of the Castlevania games that have been released before Symphony of the Night. I want to do one of those things where like you run all of the games in one series in one go. Kind of like I've seen, for example, Oats and Goats run the Metroid Marathon, or I guess the Mario Hour would be something similar to that as well. So yeah, I want to do that with Castlevania games. I have a list of 10 games that I want to run. So there's about considering I have to learn a new category for Castlevania 3 because the category that ran was 80%, which is an inconsistent glitched wrong warp. I think it would be safer to do like a warpless run for that game for a marathon setting. So I think I have to learn 8 new games. So that's going to be quite a thing to kick up. I would also love to develop practice hacks for most of the games that I'm running, just kind of to leave something behind, even if it's just kind of something basic like a room timer. And then I have like more miscellaneous games that I want to run. I generally want to like branch out even more than I am right now, run things from like more genres. And that's that. I hope to continue enjoying speedruns as much as I have. I hope to never lose the passion for this. Because I've been finding it extremely interesting and extremely rewarding to work with people who are also equally as passionate about it. And that's kind of my whole career, I think.
That's the timeline.
Indeed.
It's a good timeline. That's for
Thanks.
sure. It's definitely a lot of stuff there. more
I'm
than
gonna get
most
some
people,
water
I'd
after
say.
that one.
Oh yeah, I imagine. But yeah, I did see the YouTube video a few days ago about the
Oh,
scroll glitch. Because I didn't actually know how it like really worked. So, and I like learning about how all these glitches in the games work. So I thought it was very interesting. Like, so it's nice to
glad
like
to hear.
know what's going on behind the scenes. So I can recommend it myself, of course. So.
Glad to hear. Yeah, that's that is one thing that I've always like found inspiring about like other YouTube videos. Whenever they talk about a run that I don't know much about, and then they like break it down in a way that's like interesting and like um feels like it really like makes you understand what's going on in the game and what makes it like particularly interesting and stand out from the rest. That's always been the kind of content that I found the most inspiring, I suppose.
Mhm. Now, I remember, when the Summoning Cell video came out about Castlevania. I'm trying to remember like when it came out. You probably have a better idea of when.
December 2019,
All right. So what was the record
early
back
December.
then?
It was my 1124
24. Okay.
back then. Yeah, Tuznek ended up beating my records the year after.
Hmm. Got it. It's just funny that that came out before the entire thing was revolutionized by scroll glitch.
Yeah, I think I don't remember if it was a Reddit post or something else. It might have been a Reddit post where somebody had posted on Reddit about the discovery, and then there was a comment by Summoning Salt under that post, and it was like, "I wish I'd waited on my video."
Yeah. You can't plan for that.
Yeah,
Speed running at its finest right there, but yeah, it was just funny. I remember obviously seeing that video, and then I actually think I have an Easter egg in that video. So, you know.
oh yeah, the train station,
Oh, you
right?
know about it. All right. Sick. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there being a lot of SME1 runners in there.
Hmm. Yes, I'm one of them. I made the cut. So,
Nice.
huge. Especially back then. I don't know what I'm doing on there, but it was funny. Anyway, but
Nice.
yeah, I just remember that being a whole huge revolution in the category, and I was like, what happened?
Yeah, it's obviously that's one of the points that I made in my video, but like that is not a type of thing that you see in a lot of NES games. This game have been out
Hmm.
for 30, 40 years at this point, so like they have been looked into to the ground,
Hmm.
especially like runs that are this short and like games that are this popular. You do not see that kind of breakthrough very often, and like at this point, Castlevania is like basically the only game that I've seen that kind of thing in recent years, except for maybe like the NES Metroid, and that's like one of the Easter eggs that I also hate in my video. There's like a little flashing text that appears for a few frames and text. Yeah, I know that Metroid has a similar thing, but like the thing that happened in Metroid is that they found a faster way to screen wrap in Kraid's Lair, and like that's basically like the bulk of the time save.
Hmm. Oh, is this like new?
I think it happened in like 2020 or 2021.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
All right, I wasn't sure if what I remember or not, so I think it is then.
Right. Okay.
Okay, but yeah, Metroid's crazy. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. As much as that game bombed my big 20 in 2020, I did have a bit of an interest in running that game. I never ended up learning the run, but that's something that I can see myself doing someday. It's a game with some pretty crazy tech. It's actually, I think, Metroid might be the first NES game I ever played because a lot
Hmm.
of people end up asking me, like, how did you get into NES games? Because I am 20, I have to think about it, 24 years old at this point. And so I'm relatively young. I didn't like grow up with the NES. Um, so I grew up with the Nintendo DS and the 3DS. I bought a 3DS close to launch, and what was happening with the 3DS is that it had a weak launch, and Nintendo was trying to boost sales for it. So they ended up giving the 3DS a large price cut to encourage more people to buy it. And for the people who had already bought it, they had something called the Ambassador Program. So essentially, whoever had bought the 3DS for full price would be eligible to get a whole bunch of games for free. Um, Mostly like virtual console games. And I ended up learning about it, and I got a whole bunch of NES virtual console games on there. And I think Metroid was the first game I ever played, the first NES game I ever played. I also ended up playing Zelda 1, Zelda 2, SMB1, um, Ice Climbers, Donkey Kong Jr. probably. There were some Donkey Kong games on Virtual Console. I don't remember. Anyway, yeah, that was like my first impact with NES games. Metroid got me lost. I never beat the game back then. Zelda 2 was probably the game that I had the most fun with somehow. That was also an equally like pretty obscure game, though a bit less. I ended up being able to beat the game with a guide in the end, but like I guess I ended up liking just how fluid the overall combat was there. And that was also like one of the games I almost ended up learning the run to Zelda 2 back in like 2014 or 2015, because I ended up like watching a run with I think it's called the scroll lock glitch, where you can um, the easiest way to set it up is to go into a town, use the jump spell to go off camera on top of the screen, and then you activate the fairy spell. And something it like makes the game warp you to one location that it wasn't intended to, and it breaks the camera. And it breaks the way that collision is loaded, so you can just kind of warp around and like skip various parts of the game and like go beat the Great Palace immediately with like messed up graphics and like kid me like, I must have been like 14 or 15 back then, was like very intrigued by that, and I ended up like I experimented with that glitch. I tried it. I ended up being able to beat the Great Palace with save states, but I never ended up learning the actual speedrun.
Yeah, Zelda 2 is one of
um,
those crazy games too. Especially the
yeah,
80% run. Mind-blowing stuff.
absolutely. Yeah,
I can't imagine starting off on that.
it seems like well, I think the setups for 80% were probably a bit better back then. I think
Hmm.
nowadays they're like really gambling on like getting specific drops from specific enemies to like get level ups at specific points that refill your magic. It's like some like really extremely rigid route, I suppose. And if it doesn't go your way, you just reset.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's one of those games I don't know much about. I just, I've seen some things about the strategies you have to do, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Very,
One of those
very,
games.
very out there game, that's for sure.
Hmm.
The main category for that game is 100% all keys, and that's
Hmm.
something that JC has been running lately and getting a lot of fast progress in already. That's like a mostly non-broken run. Like it's the run that ends up relying more on like uh, combat and like general routing and stuff without like having those like super strict requirements and like crazy glitches. But hmm,
Yeah,
that's
it's a cool game.
that's like I guess a bit of a different kind of run because obviously it's a lot longer and a lot more fundamental based.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad they usually try to stick the main categories for games as the one that's, the most easy to get into, I guess.
Yeah, that is probably the most easy to get into, I would guess.
Because any percent sure as hell is not easy to get into with how that game works specifically.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's actually really interesting that you got into NES from the 3DS Ambassador program. You don't hear
yeah,
that a lot. It's cool that it actually kind of worked. Their program worked.
indeed.
Because I'm 25 and I grew up with the NES, which, is abnormal, I'd say, but my family just happened to
Right.
have one. So I assume that's how most people my age kind of found it, but getting it from the 3DS, very interesting.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that's a very common story.
No, but it's a cool story
Mhm. I do
because,
think so.
yeah, I know that Ambassador program gave you a ton of stuff. I don't know if it also gave you like the GBA, and I
Yes,
know the
it did.
SNES was locked to the new 3DS, so that
Yeah,
didn't come out
yeah,
till
it was
later. But
indeed. So the ambassador program did give you Game Boy Advance games, but crucially only for a limited period of time for some
mm,
reason, thanks
I see.
Nintendo.
Yeah.
So I ended up missing the window to download them. I don't have them.
Mm,
So it's okay because I mean, obviously nowadays there's other ways to
yeah, I
play
was gonna
Game Boy
say
Advance games on 3DS.
I have
But
them because it's surprisingly easy to hack your 3DS.
yep.
But yeah, I was trying to remember when I got my 3DS because I didn't never got any of that bonus stuff. So I don't know if we got it when the price was cut. I don't know how quickly they did that.
I think it was after a year or two, so like after 2012 or 2013. I
Hmm.
think I might have gotten my 3DS, not quite at launch. I think it might have been like early 2012.
I see. Yeah, I don't know if I just had the window and missed out or what, but yeah, I never had them, but that would have been cool because my my NES, like childhood NES, we thought it stopped working a long time ago, so I got all my games back on the Wii VC. So it would have
Mhm.
been nice to have them portably. I did end up fixing my console though; it wasn't actually broken, so I ran on that for a little bit before I got my Famicom. But oh yeah, that's something I was gonna ask. You live in a PAL region, right?
Yeah, so I end up typically having to import. Well, not necessarily, but yeah, I have to look for NTSC stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first NES that I got, as well as my Sega Genesis, and I'm trying to think. I think nothing else ended up importing from the United States directly, but those two things I could only find there. Or okay, the Genesis I could only find there, NTSC. The NES I probably had other options, but it was my first time buying anything online, so I was like, okay, I gotta get it from the United States. Later on, I mean, I ended up getting like an NTSC, Nintendo 64, a Famicom, and stuff like that. I ended up like being mostly what I would gravitate toward doing was like looking for offers inside the EU that specifically sell an NTSC console, because from time to time you can find people that just kind of tag that on there. Like it might either be people who once upon a time collected games and then started selling their stuff, or maybe people who once upon a time lived in the United States and then immigrated to Europe or whatever. So from time to time you can find that stuff, and it's typically cheaper than importing stuff from the United States because there's a lot of customs duties that you have to pay. So
Mm-hmm.
that tends to be a bit more convenient for me. But yeah, typically I have to hunt down for NTSC consoles. That's correct. In fact, when I started running NES games, I also ended up getting a CRT that specifically ended up like having to support the NTSC signals, and that wasn't super easy to find. Because okay, most TVs that were made after like the late 1990s and 2000s here in Europe typically support NTSC signal by default. We happen to have um, well, a bunch of CRTs, but only one working one at my home. Um, but that one was a brand called Mivar, which was a CRT manufacturer in Milan that ended up making CRTs up until like the 2010s or whatever. Um, but like they specifically like made it a point to like produce them like as cheaply as possible and really only intended for like old people who didn't want one of those like shiny new LCD screens. And like they did not give a crap about TSC compatibility, so like I was kind of out of luck there. I ended up like being able to find a seller eventually close to my area because getting a CRT shipped is not the easiest, so it would have been the easiest to find one like near you and then like pick it up by car or whatever. Um, and so yeah, just like a 30-minute ride, I ended up finding someone who was selling one. Got it from them. They were quite curious when I contacted them. We ended up having a phone call because they wanted to know some more information. It was like, by the way, why do you want this thing? And I mean, I ended up explaining that I needed them to. I needed specifically CRT with NTSC compatibility to run, an American NES, and they found it extremely interesting, and so on. Happily accepted the money, and I ran on that CRT for a while, and then I eventually in 2020 transitioned to a RetroTink.
Mm-hmm.
This is this is a bit of an interesting topic because it feels like everyone has their own take on it. I personally prefer on playing on an LCD screen nowadays with a RetroTink or some kind of low latency upscaler. Because the thing about a CRT is that typically, like the simple explanation that you hear about a CRT is that it has zero latency, so or rather like zero post processing, so like immediate responsiveness. The problem with that explanation, though, is that it kind of omits the fact that the CRT draws an image from top to bottom. So there's like a tube with like that fires a beam on the screen, and then this image gets drawn from left to right, from top to bottom. And this drawing process takes about 16 milliseconds of time to complete. And what that means is that if you're looking at the top of the screen, you are looking at a zero latency image. If you're looking at the bottom of the screen, that's what gets drawn last. And you're looking at about 16 milliseconds of latency over there. So what the situation with the CRT is that you have different latency depending on the part of the screen that you're looking at. Which I think is a bit weird. Like, if you have, like, for example, a platformer game where, like, you're having to look at your character when it reaches a certain part of the screen, you're gonna have to come up with different visual cues depending on whether you're looking at the top or the bottom. And while an LCD screen, in even itself, it has like a slightly different process, but I believe it's more uniform than a CRT. I've tested this with like my phone. I pointed a camera both at my CRT and the LCD, and with the LCD, I couldn't really see a difference, but like I could definitely see a difference in delay between me pressing the button on a CRT versus an LCD screen. And yeah, an LCD screen does have like a bit of a, I don't know what it's called exactly, like a processing time. There's like a bit of latency, but it does feel a bit more uniform. And like I think, like in my experience, by getting like a good LCD screen that only adds a few milliseconds, it has felt better than playing on a CRT with me. Like the game that I transitioned on was Donkey Kong Country 2, and it was feeling like for certain visual cues, I would have to aim later. Like it felt like I was inputting stuff too late, or which was the direction that that means that you're used to playing with latency. But it felt like I was playing with less latency somehow.
Hmm.
So
It's funny. I know how CRTs
there was,
work, but I never thought about it.
yeah,
It's interesting.
it's I mean, it definitely, like, I think it was somebody in the Castlevania Discord that pointed this process out, and I'd never like thought about it either.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it like definitely makes sense once you like can I think about it.
Hmm. Got me thinking
But yeah,
about my like history with CRTs now. Like, I wonder if it's been why I've been confused on like very specific instances. I don't know. Hmm.
right.
Fascinating stuff. Because I have a 27-inch
Mm-hmm.
Trinitron, so it big boy, you know, like 150 pounds. I know I'm using American weights and distances and
Yeah, I'm
whatever,
having
but
to let's see, pounds to kilos. Let's do this real quick. 150, that would be 22 kilos. Okay, cool.
so, you know.
Wait, no, that's 50. No, I want 150. Okay, 68 kilo. Oh boy, that is heavy.
Yeah, so you can imagine it's not moving, it's not going anywhere. And you know,
Right? Yeah.
I also, you know, drove like an hour and picked it up and needed some help, but in their advertisement they had Mario 1 running on it. So I was like, okay, this is obviously a calling card, so I got to pick it up now. But
Right.
yeah, so you know, the screen's really large, so who knows if that like causes some other like small thing with the process. I
Um,
don't know, but I
I
never
wouldn't
thought
think
about it.
so. I think there's like different types of CRTs that came out in the 2000s that work a bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know too much more beyond that, but
Yeah,
I think all CRTs in principle should work the same, where
I
like
see.
you have a beam that draws from top to bottom, and so that means that the top gets drawn first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I only got it because it has component like RGB, and
right, yeah.
yeah. So with my all my modded consoles is the way, but yeah, I've been looking more and more into the RetroTink side of things. I at least want one, even if I still play on CRT, to just like upscale my capture feed, and then I could finally ditch Amarek because, good lord, I hate it.
Ooh, yeah. Are you using Emerac with the GV USB 2 or
Now I
something?
have a StarTech, uh,
Okay,
but I have to use Amarek because the StarTech's direct capture with the component signal is like really, it drops frames all the time. It's really stuttery and not great. And
I
the
see.
picture isn't as clear. But if you use Amarek, like it fixes all of those issues. But then Amarek has its own like running at all issues, and like I need like custom unofficial drivers for it to even it's a
Yeah,
whole
that's
pain in the ass.
That is a really old piece of software at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I still have it. I had an Elgato HD60S. That was the first HDMI capture card that I bought, and
Mm-hmm.
originally was using with the RetroTink. And I was also having problems with like weird driver issues. But like the most notable thing was um, whenever I'd first like fire it up, it would work great. Then it didn't like me resetting the console.
I've
So
heard that
like
a
after
lot.
I'd reset it a couple times, the video would start to get choppy or the audio would get out of sync.
Yeah.
And it seems like different drivers behave differently. So I was kind of like wondering what was up with that. And then that was around the time where unbranded HDMI capture cards were like first popping up, like those unbranded HDMI USB 2.0 capture cards that like don't seem like should be any good. Uh, like some people I tried them and were like, these are surprisingly like pretty good for what they are. And like I ended up getting one of them, and like all my issues went away. Like I ended up having a few color issues that I think I ended up eventually like being able to fix with some like tinkering in the settings, but like I was able to just like reset all I wanted, and like it seems like that HDMI capture card was just like taking in whatever signal it was receiving without a care. Meanwhile, it seems like the Elgato was like trying to do something with it. Um, the only like small issue that it had was that sometimes whenever I'd reset a console, the audio would play down pitched for some reason. But then I ended up getting another unbranded HDMI capture card for 30 euros, and which I'm using to this day, and this one has been working great, like zero issues so far. Uh, so
Very interesting.
I can the problem with unbranded HDMI capture cards is that it's a bit of a lottery. You don't know exactly what you're getting. Like if you are looking for a capture card, and like you can like get advice from people and are like, oh yeah, I use like an Elgato and it's like working great with me, and like you can kind of have the guarantee that you're getting the same thing. But like this is just you're you're looking through Amazon for like HDMI capture card, and then it's like this weird capture card that like you're probably the only one in your circle buying, and then you have to hope it's good.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean what I have has been working pretty well with me. Seems like it's able to take in whatever I throw at it. Like I've used it for my Nintendo Switch as well as with my NES. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was nice about the StarTech is it does the HDMI, but it also does composite component and S video.
right,
Yeah. So
yeah. So you don't need a
I think
ratchet
it
link in
even
that
does
case.
SCART. Yeah. So like I never, because I played on CRT, I was like, well, I don't need a retro tank, so I'll just do it this way. But
Yeah, that
then
makes
it
sense.
then it had that whole. I don't think when it's the HDMI, it has any issues through OBS. I don't think. I'll need to like test that because I don't do much HDMI stuff, um but yeah, if I got a retro tank, I could use HDMI all the time, and maybe that would solve all my issues. So even if I still played on CRT, I could do that. So
Yeah, perhaps.
I'm super looking into it just for that. But yeah, now you got me thinking. Ooh, monitor too. Hmm. Maybe that would
Yeah,
solve other
and then
issues.
at that point you look at the price tag for everything and you're like, am I really spending this much on?
I've already spent so much on my setup,
Yeah,
and it's not even that like impressive. It just all the tech is just it adds up over time.
yeah, it's quite the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
But at a GDQs now they have you play on retro tanks on monitors and
Yeah, same thing at ESA. It's like
mhm.
basically no CRTs in sight anymore.
And I've had some really great runs on those monitors, so maybe there's something to them. I'll
That's good
have
to
to
hear.
yeah, I'll have to keep
Yeah, because
looking
I don't
at
know.
it.
My concern with like forcing people to play on LCD with these events is like if someone is used on to a CRT, it might still feel like a bit of a transition.
Hmm.
Um, we're actually like kind of going through that topic a bit because I'm on staff for. Here's another plug. We have a speedrunning event coming up for the Italian speedrunning community called Giochi d'un Fiato, and I'm on staff this year, and we were just like talking about the like possibility of letting some people run on CRT who are used to CRT, and, you know. So that's kind of my one concern is like if somebody is used to running on a CRT and then we make them run on LCD, regardless of how good that LCD screen, like that's probably gonna feel different and like might be Might be a bit weird if like you're running Super Mario 64 and have 10,000 hours in it, and now suddenly the input delay is like ever so slightly different.
Hmm. Well, I can at least speak from my experience then, because I was like super worried at the past couple GDQ runs I did. I was like, oh, I hope they have a CRT, because they used to, and now
Mhm.
if they'll give you one if you ask, but you know it's a whole pain in the ass, so they prefer not to. So I try not to. So I would like I practice with the monitors because they have a nice practice room for it, and I actually think I played better on them almost. I mean, I didn't test it that much, but my runs on stage were incredibly good. So I can only
That's very
assume like
interesting.
it worked pretty well. But I did I gave myself time to like practice on them and see what the difference was, because at first I did feel like there was like one frame of input lag that I wasn't used to. So it was like an adjustment. That's at 60 FPS though.
Right.
So
It also
yeah.
depends on the monitor. 'Cause in my experience,
Hmm.
a lot of monitors nowadays are gonna be like monitors with like a really high refresh rate, so like 144 hertz, 160, whatever. Um, I do have one 165 hertz monitor, and I ended up trying to play with a red shooting on it, but like I ended up like feeling and also later measuring one extra frame of input delay on that specific monitor. It just felt weird to play on there. What I ended up reading is that if you're getting a monitor that is designed to mainly be used at a high refresh rate, it may not be optimized for input latency when it later runs at 60 hertz. So
Mm. All right.
um, they're a bit harder to find nowadays for some reason, but I ended up like trying to stick to monitors that were like just straight up 60 hertz and didn't do anymore because like I mean I didn't really need more than 60 hertz if I was mostly going to use them for console runs.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm not sure how easy it is to find like a standard high refresh rate monitor that also works well whenever you're like trying to play a console on it that runs at 60 hertz. My one experience with it has been bad. Like the one 165 hertz monitor that I got, I ended up introducing more input latency compared to my one monitor that was 75 hertz on the other hand.
Yeah, I have a nice 60 hertz, pretty big monitor that I'm like looking at OBS through right now. So I don't
Gotcha.
I don't know how that would work with like my classic stuff. I don't know what it's optimized for. I don't know how it falls in the like input latency scale, because I usually don't use it for games. I use it as just my second monitor for my laptop. So
Right, yeah. There should be specs online that you should be able to Google. I don't remember
mhm.
the exact website, but like there are websites out there that compile information on different monitors and give you all kinds of different measurements.
Yeah, that's all good.
So you might be able to find that brand out and see.
It's funny, my so my laptop screen, its refresh rate is 300 hertz.
Oh,
I, I don't know why, but it is.
very very interesting choice, or like design choice
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely a bit overkill, I'd say. I don't need it for that. It's funny on
Yeah,
live split. It'll show every decimal for me now, because that's a
very
hundred in a
smooth
second.
light split action.
More live split action, even though in the recording it's still 60, so you couldn't
Yeah,
tell. But to me, see every decimal, and it shows it there for 3 frames each decimal. Just super
indeed.
stupid refresh rate. I don't know why it's so high, but it's funny. But yeah, I've thought of getting like doing research and getting a proper like monitor for the speed runs, but it could also do the modern consoles, so maybe you'd want 120 at least. I don't know. It's all there's so much research that has to be done for to find what works best, because I mean that would be like a splurge a little bit. So
Right. Yeah, and, for me personally, like I don't have and I'm not planning on getting any of the modern consoles that do more than 60 FPS.
mhm.
So for me, it's always been enough. Like the most modern console that I've run on is the Nintendo Switch, and that one is like locked at 60. So
Yeah, that is low. But no, we're hoping for some new console soon from them. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know what the
there's
talks are, but
rumors.
there are rumors. I'm not too familiar with them, but People seem
Me
to.
neither. Like I've heard that like people speculate about the Switch 2. I don't know how much that credibility that has, but I guess we'll ride it out and see whatever they announce the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been on the market a while, so
Yep. It's like now one of their longer lasting consoles.
I guess
I
so.
think let me think about this. I think their longest lasting might have been the Famicom because it came out in
Like
Japan
the
in
original.
1983,
Yeah.
and then the SNES came out in 1990. So that was
Wow.
7 years.
hmm
Um,
So this is at least a match to that.
yeah,
Wow. That's crazy. I forget like how quickly they actually release new consoles usually. Like
yeah.
console generations don't actually last that long in the grand scheme of
Then
things.
again, we're probably entering the period in gaming where like um, new hardware is starting to become less and less justified, quote unquote. Like you're not gonna
Necessary.
see a jump in performance as you did from the Super Nintendo to the N64 in the span of like 5 years. So
hmm Yeah, I
that being
I
said, the Switch hardware has its age at this point, and like
mhm.
a lot of games that are coming up don't run as well. I think there was a video I'd seen at somewhere where like they could get some Switch games to run faster on the Switch if they homebrewed the Switch, ran a redacted emulator on it.
I
So
see.
like if the Nintendo Switch emulated the Nintendo Switch and then you ran the game on that, it would run faster than it would on the Switch.
That doesn't make any
It,
sense to
it,
me.
it doesn't make any sense, no.
Okay. Uh classic
But yeah, no,
Nintendo. That's
the
great.
Switch definitely has its age. Like already at the time, like it was sort of mobile hardware that was a tiny bit old at that point, and at this point, it's like pretty old.
hmm Yeah, I'm hoping generations last longer now. Like
Yeah.
th- there's just they keep adding all this stuff that is just so unnecessary, I think, or they don't use the technology to the extent that would be useful to own, I guess. So,
hmm
yeah. Hopefully
Nintendo
it
definitely
dies
likes
down a
to
bit.
try out their game mix, as we've seen over the years with like
Nintendo
motion
can
controls, 3D,
do
the the,
something
the,
new.
the bulky gamepad, and then whatever the Nintendo Switch tried to unify all of.
hmm Yeah. I'm interested to see what they do if all of this talk is leading anywhere, but I
Mhm.
mean, no way to know until it happens. And they
Indeed.
are cracking down on their Switch emulation, so maybe they don't plan on doing anything if they still care that much. Who knows?
Well, one could make the argument that like one of the reasons why they took out Yuzu was because maybe the new console that they're looking to release is like either backward compatible with the Switch or like just an upgraded Switch. So
Yeah,
perhaps they have more of an interest in keeping emulation off as an option for if they're looking to keep Switch games on the market for a while longer
I
still. But
suppose.
again, this is all speculation. We'll see whatever they end up saying later down the line.
Yeah. My hot take is I think it'd be kind of boring if it was just Switch 2. Like, I mean, Nintendo's known for doing something unique every console, so like obviously it could be an upgraded Switch, but maybe something a little more to it. I don't know.
Yeah, I can definitely see it potentially being more interesting if they end up pulling another gimmick out of their hat, or even just like you know giving it. Because yeah, Nintendo at this point has developed like their own brand around trying as hard as possible to make their next thing feel even more unique compared to the next. So
hmm
um, it would feel a bit out of character if they just ended up releasing an upgraded version of the Switch. But again,
Yeah.
who, who, only Nintendo knows.
Yeah, there's something that was mentioned earlier that I forgot to ask about. Did you run Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Unfortunately, I did.
Oh,
That was okay.
I
That
see
was
why you
another game
skipped
I ran.
over it, but I gotta ask.
So I have a bit of a tradition that I haven't respected in 2 years, but um, I ran. So as I mentioned earlier, I ran Dragon Slayer on April Fools because I thought it would be funny.
Hmm.
And then the year after, in 2021, I ran Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and that felt like the natural progression. Um, just a fun April Fool's stream, wherever I ran an extremely questionable game. Um, Last year I couldn't attend because I was at the previous iteration of the Italian speedrunning marathon. And this year I won't be either because I will be out of town for different reasons. So
Oh
I
well.
haven't been able to do some kind of April Fool stream in a while. But that's kind of been what I'm going for. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is what to me felt like possibly the worst speedrun I've ever experienced. And like, I'm not saying that just because the game is infamously bad. Speedrunning that game feels like taking um, every element that you can think of that makes a speedrun worse in a good speedrun, uh, blending it together in a mixer, and just throwing it all in one game and making it the basis of the entire speedrun, and that's it. Like, if you can think of a speedrun that has RNG that makes it unfun, if you can think of a speedrun that has like stupid tricks that sometimes just don't work, if you can think of a speedrun that has just like boring parts on it, take all the bad parts and put them in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's the entire game.
Yeah, I remember
Um,
watching Andrew G run that. So
oh yeah,
I watched it a little bit and I was just like, this looks like the worst thing you could do to yourself. So I
yeah,
needed to
it
know.
really is. It's
Okay.
it's a remarkably bad speedrun. You do not come across speedrun that are that bad very often.
Yeah, usually bad
That I
games
would,
make great speedruns. This is a not
yeah,
that example.
exactly.
That's so funny. But yeah, it was brought up and I just had to ask. I was like, oh god, I know that that's awful.
It is. It really is.
That's
In a
funny.
way, I would almost recommend like um if you're interested in what makes a speedrun bad, if you want to explore that topic, that is a game that you can run just to like understand what makes a speedrun frustrating and unfun. Don't recommend running the game seriously. I haven't, and that's that. It's a boring run, and it's an RNG frustrating hell.
Well, everything I love right there. No.
Yep.
Wow. So you keep bringing up this speedrun event. I don't think I've heard of it. Uh what was it?
The Italian speedrunning community event that's called Giochi di un Fiato. It's a local. It's a local in-person speedrunning event that we do in Italy.
Okay.
The first edition, well, the first editions were done online. Then we started doing them in person. First time was in Milan. Second time was in Bologna, and then this year is going to be in Bologna again.
Okay. So just like an in-person Italian event.
Yep.
Okay. Do you know how many like participants kind of show up to it?
I think it's like roughly 30 or 40 people
All
usually.
right, so kind of a smaller scale
Yep.
meetup. Okay. And
The event is going to last 2 days, and we have like a schedule for most of the daylight, I suppose.
okay. And
We don't do overnight shifts.
that's fair. Gosh. Especially if you're staff, I can't imagine doing
Yeah.
doing that. But yeah, are these like streamed as well, or is it just like a meetup?
Yeah, it's streamed on the Italian speedrunning community channel on Twitch. It's literally just called Italian speedrunning community.
All right. Yeah, I've never heard of
Um,
it, so it's very interesting to learn about more speedrunning events that are out there, especially worldwide.
Indeed. Yeah, it emerged over the past 4 or 5 years, I want to say. So it's not like it's relatively new, I suppose. Although at this point we have our years behind us, I suppose.
I was gonna say that's not that new, honestly, compared
Mhm.
to some other things I've seen. So,
Sure, yeah.
but yeah, do you have you brought up ESA, so do you have experience with like them and other speedrun events as well?
Uh, so ESA, I've never been to GDQ. That's something that I would like to go to one day, but obviously that's a pretty expensive travel for me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, ASA was very fun. I've been there in 2019 as well as last year in 2023. Um, it's obviously a very nice opportunity to meet up with other people who you typically only interact with over the internet. Just kind of spend time together, be in the hang out in the practice room, go outside. We played mini golf the other time. That was the first time I had ever played mini golf, and I sucked at it.
Well, if it's your first time, I can
Yeah,
imagine. That's how it goes.
but yeah, definitely. That definitely was a high moment, a highlight of the year.
Yeah, I've never been to an ESA and probably will never go to one just because, again, for the same reason you see you across the
Yeah,
world, kind of hard to do. So,
indeed.
I'm not like, I guess you wouldn't know the differences between that and GDQ, but
What I've heard is that GDQ events are typically bigger, so
well, yeah.
there's a lot more attendance. Yeah, I guess I can't make really any direct comparisons. I would imagine. I mean, at ESA, like already, it's the kind of thing where like you probably gravitate towards a group of people who you already know, and there's gonna be like a whole bunch of people at the event who you're never gonna be interacting with. Because there are a lot of attendees at ESA, even though it's probably smaller than GDQ. On the other hand, the Italian speedrunning community, I think both times I've been able to at least like get a chat with everyone who was there at the event because the number is obviously a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Do you know approximately how many attendees go to ESA?
Ooh, that is probably a bit hard to estimate.
Yeah. I know GDQ is like
I'm
always
gonna.
over 1,000, but
Oh yeah, right. I mean, I'm gonna make a guess and say that there are throughout the entire week there might be a few hundreds at ESA. Maybe.
man, that's pretty big.
It might be
Because
completely wrong.
so it might be like Pace, which is another American speedrun
Yeah,
event.
perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've known some people that have gone there from the US, but I don't know how they
Yeah,
do
there's always a few
it.
people who come, but yeah, obviously that's more difficult travel for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have like events worldwide for the community
Mhm.
that can be big. Like I know Japan has a big RTA event.
Yeah, that's
Europe's got its
another one that I'd
ESA.
like to attend to at some point.
Oh,
But
really? Japan?
yeah, obviously like that's a bit different because okay, if you're looking to do a run there or like just if you're looking to have a run there, you should have some Japanese commentary. So
Mhm.
either you know someone who can do it for you, or you do it yourself.
Oh.
My Japanese skills are not enough to do commentary wouldn't be enough to do commentary for my own run.
Mhm.
So yeah, like that would be a situation that would have to be thought out. I've heard that I've been told that RTA Japan is typically done in like what's typically like a pretty small office space that they rent. So it's not like a big venue with like a whole bunch of rooms. It's literally like the event is like in a pretty restricted space, and then like people who attend in RTA Japan typically are hanging out outside of the event. So that event probably feels more unique compared to something like ESA and GDQ, which I think have more similarities.
Mhm.
But definitely would be an interesting experience. Visiting Japan, of course, is something that I'd be really interesting in general. So
Yeah, that's an event I'm not really familiar with at all. I just know
yeah,
it exists and that it's pretty big for what it is. So yeah, I'm
yeah, it
fascinated
really
by
is.
it. I'm fascinated by just in-person speedrun events. Like, I love going to them personally. So
Yeah,
I like
same.
hearing the differences between how they work elsewhere in the world because I'd never be able to go to them. So I got to live vicariously through other people, I guess. But yeah, I guess I did forget to ask, like, have you done runs at the live events you've been at?
Yeah, I've let's see. 2019, I ran Cuphead in co-op. It was a co-op race actually. I was on the team with the Mexican runner, and I went up against Kirtor and Kaleva. We ran Cuphead Expert Low Percent, which
Super
was one of
hard.
the harder categories at
Yeah.
the time. It's basically hater percent without the hater stuff. Um,
I see.
then last ESA, I ran Donkey Kong Country 2, The Lion King, and Gimmick. So 3 games.
Mm.
Um, then at the time of Speedrunning Marathon, the in-person events that I've done, I ran Castlevania Dracula X, and I ran what did I run last year? Oh yeah, Donald the My Mallard. That was the one.
Okay. I see.
And then this year I'm running Castlevania.
Mm.
And that's all the in-person events. I've run more things over like online marathons, but I can hardly remember all the online marathons that I've
Yeah,
participated
there's
on at this
there's
point.
so many of them, and they blend together because they're
Yeah,
so easy to just join up and do one thing.
yeah, that's definitely their strengths
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, I'm running one in a week. We'll see how that goes, but
Oh, good luck. What game are you running, and where?
oh, oh, I meant I'm hosting it, so I'm not doing
Oh,
anything.
okay,
Yeah. I've done so many online runs, so again, just like you, I couldn't come up with all of them.
right.
I probably did
Oh, good.
Mario, in all of them, so
Yeah,
take
makes
with that
sense.
as you will. But yeah, I
No, good
mean,
luck on that though. I mean, running your own event is definitely a pretty interesting experience.
yeah, I've never done it before, so
Lots to manage.
yeah. And then I assume it'd be a lot harder in like an in-person staff job. So is
Yeah,
this
because
your
then you
first time
gotta
being
manage like
staff,
all the
or
hardware.
yeah, is this your first time being staff for that Italian event,
Yeah,
or
that's gonna be
okay?
my first time being on staff.
I see.
Although
So
I'm not the only one on staff.
well, yeah,
We're split into different teams. I'm on the setup team who's gonna work on hardware tech, and we're a group of 4, so
I see.
I'm not alone.
Yeah, that's good. No, I'd be very scared for you if if you were alone on that. That no one should be alone on when it comes to the
Yeah,
setup team.
indeed.
Oh my gosh.
Especially since there's like some setup stuff that I'm not familiar with. Like there's obviously gonna be PC runs where you typically want to run different programs for either compatibility or to lock frame rate.
Hmm.
There's consoles that I'm not very familiar with in terms of setup. There's gonna be some runs on PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 5.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I'm not.
obviously, like as much as I think I have a pretty wide experience across different consoles at this point, but I obviously still don't know how to handle everything. So
Yeah, you seem kind of Nintendo focused more than any other
yeah,
console
I've run
manufacturer.
a game on. I've run a PlayStation 1 game before as a 12-hour challenge. That was Clonoa Door to Phantom Isle.
Mm,
So I got some experience with modding my PlayStation 2. I do have one.
I see.
It was a PAL console that I modded for, NTSC support.
Hmm.
Um, I learned how to burn a CD because that's a thing you can do.
Mm,
So like instead of getting an original copy, if you have a CD drive in a PC, you can just burn an ISO on a CD and then run it. And
mm,
not every console is gonna run the same, but it seems like for a lot of PlayStation 1 games, it just runs the same. So I just kind of asked the moderators who, like, there was no rule at the time. So I just kind of asked, can I do this? And they were like, yeah, seems like this runs the same. Like loading times are identical. Go for it. Okay.
mm.
So
Yeah.
because obviously a lot of PlayStation 1 games are also starting to get very expensive.
Oh
So
God. Yeah. Yeah, I picked up a PlayStation, uh, original PlayStation, I think sometime last year. I'd never had owned a PlayStation console. I still have never really used it because, again, like games are hard to come by, and I don't even know what I'd like. So I've been waiting for this device. I got one with the port on the back, the parallel port on the back, and you can plug in a
mhm.
device to kind of like read ISOs off of. But that's been out of stock for like
Okay.
2 years, so we'll see if I ever actually get one. But yeah, I'm interested what PlayStation's like. I'm super just unfamiliar with that line of systems. I have a PS3 that I've been using a little more, but that's when it becomes that's around the era where it was like on every kind of main console, so it's a little different.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few interesting games on PS1. I feel like. Uh, let's see. I've played and beaten Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That's a 2D game.
Hmm.
Played and beaten Clonador to find Tomail. I've played Spyro 1, not beaten. Oh, that might be it actually. So I guess my PlayStation 1 experience might be a bit limited, but there's quite a few games that I like kept eyeballing for that system. It does seems like it does seem like it has a pretty good library.
Hmm. Yeah, you saying something in the night reminded me when you brought up the Castlevania challenge you want to do.
Yeah.
Do you know every game that would be a part of it?
So, Castlevania 1, 2, and 3, so the entire NES trilogy. Then the 3 Game Boy games, which would be
Oh.
Castlevania The Adventure, Castlevania Balmos Revenge, and Castlevania Legends. Technically, Legends came out after Symphony of the Night, but I'm making an exception with that one because it completes the Game Boy trilogy and it just feels similar to the other Game Boy games, so it just makes sense. Then Super Castlevania 4, which is for Super Nintendo, Castlevania Dracula X, which is also for Super Nintendo, Castlevania Bloodlines, which is for Genesis, and then Castlevania Round of Blood, which is for the PC Engine, also known as the TurboGrafx 16 in
Oh.
Western countries.
Yeah.
Which is something that I might not run on console. The leaderboards default to the Wii Virtual Console release. It's a bit of a
Oh.
hard and expensive console to come by anyway, so it kind
Yeah.
of makes sense.
Hmm.
So that's the entire list. The criteria is basically like all classic Castlevania games that came out on console before Symphony of the Night, except Legends, again, making that exception.
It's crazy how many Castlevania games came out before Symphony of the Night.
Yeah.
That's such a
Before
huge
the game
one.
that like ended up changing the franchise in a pretty drastic way.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not hugely familiar with the franchise. I never like grew up with any of the games, so I've obviously been super interested in like the NES games in the speedrun sense. I obviously
Mhm.
know Castlevania 1 more than any other of the games, so I can't speak for the others, but gosh,
There
that just seems pretty hard. I don't know how hard all the other games are in comparison to 1. I know 1's ridiculous.
yeah. Right. So generally speaking, the NES Castlevanias have like quite a bit of their unique tag to it. Castlevania 2 has arguably more difficult tricks than Castlevania 1. So
Really?
there's the main tech in that game is called floor drops, where if you have a specific subpixel value and you
Oh.
whip on the same frame that you land from a 2 block height, you can drop through the floor, and it's used to flip through a whole bunch of terrain and access shortcuts and stuff. You can also chain floor drops. If after dropping the second floor drop there is a 3 block gap, you can drop through that second floor by doing another frame perfect whip. And so there's like double floor drop. There's a quad drop at some point in the run.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Right?
Right at the very end too. There's crits where if a sub weapon hits an enemy on the last frame, it's active. It deals massive damage, and it typically one shots almost everything in the game except the final boss that takes 2 hits. There's dash jumps where on moving platforms, if you release the D-pad before you jump, you get a speed boost. There's health management. There's random drops that can, after you get enough of them, you level up and you refill your health. So there's like strategy in terms of when you should level up. There's strategy in terms of when you should take a death, which also refills your health in the fastest way possible. But you also have limited amount of lives, so you can't die too much. There is an RNG damage boost about halfway through the run. It's called the blood boost, and it likes to kill runs. Um,
Hmm.
it's a run with like a heck of a lot to it. And it's 30 minutes long. The world record at the moment is 29:47. JC got an incredible run.
Wow.
Like for how much difficult tech there is in that game, he got extremely clean execution with just like a few mistakes and like very good RNG throughout. That is arguably like about as hard of a run to beat as the current record in CV1. Like I'm
Wow.
not kidding.
I guess I
Um,
didn't realize just how technical that
yeah,
game was. Wow.
extremely technical
That's
for sure.
crazy.
Um, Castlevania 3 is a bit on the tamer side. Depends on the kind of run you do, but if you're doing a run like Trevor only or like Alucard, there doesn't tend to be as much tech to talk about, although there's definitely still some. With Alucard, you can do some damage boosts to clip through some blocks. If you're doing the sci-fi run, you can freeze enemies to like create staircases in some spots. If you're doing Grant, which is also what's used in the any percent run, there is a very like difficult trick where if you initiate an attack, you release the D-pad right before touching the wall, and this can vary between being a 0-frame window to a 2-frame window, depending on your sub-pixel, I think. You will launch halfway across the screen. Like you just teleport with momentum halfway across the screen. If you're on the lower part of the screen, you warp to the top. If you're on the top, you warp to the bottom. And that can open up shortcuts. There's some spots where like it's extremely YOLO. You either get it or you die. In 80%, there's one that saves 7 seconds that you're kind of forced to go for. It's called Pendulum Skip, and it saves a cycle on some moving platforms. That one has killed a lot of runs during my own grind. And 80% is this style of run where, so the way Castlevania 3 is structured is you have branching paths, so you can choose what level to play. And depending on what path you choose, you can recruit different characters. What you do in 80% is you go recruit Grant right away, which is the slowest character to recruit. But what it allows you to do is a few levels later, there's a spot where there's a staircase that leads to another screen. If you are on Trevor and you swap to Grant within a 5-frame window, it displaces Grant on stairs a bit. And then if you go back up, you can keep going up past a block. So it's kind of like if you've seen scroll glitches in Castlevania 1, like in stage 13, for example, you can keep going up into the staircase because there's no block to get you off the state where you're climbing stairs. Except in Castlevania 3, you do that trick to access a glitch ward, which is just a mess of glitchy tiles. You go around there in a specific way for about 3 minutes. So you gotta memorize where you're supposed to be going. There's a spot where there's some enemy RNG that can sometimes hit you. It's imperative that you remain at full health because that there's some screens that read your health as part of level data, I think. And like it just doesn't work if you're not at full health. But eventually, if you get to a specific screen, it corrupts the memory address that corresponds to your current level. And then you die and you are up to the final stage. And then you beat the game from there.
Jesus.
So that's the glitched 80% run.
Okay. How have I never seen
generally speak, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's it skips about half the game pretty much.
I know what I'm doing later. I'm watching these.
Yeah, go on ahead. Here's another fun fact. Technically, the scroll glitch exists in Castlevania 3. Not in Castlevania 2, because they used a different algorithm, but in Castlevania 3, they recycled the algorithm from Castlevania 1, and they patched it up a bit more. So the setups that we do in real time don't work in Castlevania 3, but the task setup, if you're doing pulse buffers in a certain way, works. And in the current 80% tasks, there's only one spot that you can use it and save time with, and it's on Dracula. For the grand, I think for some of the Warpless runs, there's more uses, but that's a fun fact. And actually, the fact that that algorithm got recycled and then patched kind of indicates that they knew that the scroll glitches existed, don't they? Like they'd have no reason to fix how some of the exploits worked otherwise. So that's an interesting fun fact for you. But yeah, generally speaking, CV3, like despite all of this craziness, I would still say it's a bit tamer in terms of existing tech. Like generally speaking, it's a lot more about like mastering basic movement and routing, I suppose, in a more intended way. But still, it has still gotten its own tricks up its sleeve, especially if you're using Grant.
Yeah, I love
Super
Oh wait.
No, I was gonna say Super Castlevania 4. Obviously, like now we're getting into Super Nintendo territory, but that arguably I've heard JC say that it might be the hardest Castlevania game that he's run because that's an extremely technical run. But obviously, there you have a lot more movement options at your disposal. So it's kind of natural.
Yeah. I was just gonna say I love when especially in the NES era when they like patched a game, but the thing they tried to patch still exists. Kind of like
Yeah.
what you were saying with that. Like I know with Mario 1 they tried to patch Minus World and like later they had like some games that were almost exactly SB1 but like a little different and they removed like the way you everyone would clip into the wall and do it, but you can still just like clip into the wall in another way pretty easily if you know what
Are
you're
you talking
doing.
about, for example, Super Mario Bros. 1 Deluxe on Game Boy Color, or stuff like that?
No, those are yeah. I don't know about deluxe. I assume like actually its mechanics and physics are completely different. I'm pretty sure. I've
Okay.
never run it, so I don't know. But no, it's like they had an arcade game. There was Versus Super Mario Brothers for the arcade, which had
Okay.
like different level design, and I think they tried to patch Midas World, but
Gotcha.
like you can still do the glitch in another way. You just can't do the way everyone has done it. So it's stuff like that.
Yeah, that is quite funny. There's definitely other examples that I knew at some point. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now.
Mhm. But yeah, for those other Castlevania games, you were talking about the SNES game, like that's like the hardest one. After everything you talked about, this Castlevania 2, I don't know how it could get worse.
Right. So in Castlevania 4, first of all, you can control your jump in midair. That adds obviously more movement options, more opportunity to save frames here and there or whatever. You have jump heights. It's a bit subtle, but if you press the jump button for only one frame, you're gonna have a smaller jump compared to pressing it for one frame. And then if you press for 2 frames, that's the max height. And that actually is relevant for some spots of the run. First of all, obviously, if you're doing vertical climbs, you want to jump as small as possible. There's some spots where there's one spot in level 8 where you're trying specifically to do a 1 frame jump under a crusher, and then if you jump too high, you just die.
Oh.
There's a whole bunch of RNG in the run, across enemies, across bosses. There's this infamous spot called the Vegas Bridge at the end of level 8, where there's like disappearing platforms, and I believe some patterns just kill you if you're trying to go it fast. Um, and then you can also whip in 8 directions in that game. So
Mm.
you can generally take care of enemies quite fast, like almost without stopping a lot of the times. But um, like some ways that you have to take care of enemies are like extremely finicky and specific, it seems. And like people are really pushing for like these strategies that only save like half a second or a second, but like it being a really long run and being a lot of these opportunities, it builds up and people go for as many of these as possible. There's obviously the fact that there are RNG on different things means that you have to memorize different potential routes through a level depending on how much health you've lost so far, how many hearts you have, and so on. Um, there's a zip at some point. There's just a whole bunch of like tech to the run. Like from whatever, obviously I've never run the game myself, but like whenever I watch people, they're just like practicing one section and like trying to refine it, and like the run is like 30 minutes long.
Mm. So it's kind of like Castlevania 2, just with more movement
Yeah,
options.
yeah, I guess that sounds about right.
Okay. Well, at least the timing sounds about the same.
Hmm.
Time of the run. So that's interesting. And
Bit
then
longer, I suppose. It's 31:18 is the current record.
yeah, so just minute and some change.
Yep.
Um, are any of the other games in this challenge like have interesting stuff to them? I know the Game Boy games probably don't. Could be wrong, but it's the Game Boy. What could there possibly
Uh,
be?
yeah, okay. The Game Boy games in general seem simpler.
Hmm.
Belmont's Revenge looks surprisingly like a bit more complex, despite having overall pretty basic movement. Because, I mean, from what I watched here and there, like it seems like there's a bunch of strats that seem tight. Despite like you moving at an overall pretty slow pace and having like a whip and like one sub weapon that you're using for the entire run. Um, the probably more complex games are, I would think. Well, I've already run Castlevania Dracula X. That has its own like bag of things. But Bloodlines and Round of Blood seem pretty complicated. Round of Blood has pretty difficult movement because you're backflipping through the entire game, and
Oh.
that in itself also has like a whole bunch of difficult sections and RNG moments, difficult boss fights. There's a fight that you kind of have to improv in Round of Blood. It's the death fight. It just kind of flies around the screen randomly. There's like sites that spawn in random spots. But that's always an interesting thing in a speedrun when there's like a thing that it's just improv LOL.
Yeah.
So that's a fun one. Bloodlines. Bloodlines is like similar to SCV4 to where like it gives you a whole bunch of movement options. You can whip in 5 directions in that game. It seems more brutal in a way because they made the way they build the mechanic around the whip in that game is that you can get upgrades, but if you get hit, you lose your whip upgrade. So it seems like a pretty brutal run. You just it seems like extremely punishing whenever you make a mistake, while still having a lot of tech to it. Like it seems like there's like a zips at some point. There's some really difficult sections in terms of like taking care of enemies fast and so on. So that's that also sounds pretty like that also seems like a pretty difficult run from the outside. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to getting the experience across all of these games and then being able to compare firsthand what it's gonna end up feeling like.
Do you have like an estimate of how long this challenge would take?
I had one once upon a time. I think
Yeah.
it was like 3 or 4 hours.
That's not that long from what I was thinking it would be. I guess none of the games are that long, but
Yeah, you would think like if it's 10 games and they're all 30 minutes long, I guess it would be 5 hours. But a lot of these games are like 10, 20 minutes. So
guess I forget that Castlevania games really, well, at least back then, aren't very long actually. They're
yeah,
only long because they're hard. So
exactly.
you
Yeah,
have to
like like a lot of games of this era.
I guess that's fair, but there are some that you get your money's worth with or
Yeah.
without your skill level, I guess, but it's just very interesting. But yeah, obviously you've run a ton of games, so is there any other game you've run that we didn't go into depth about that you think is worthy of it?
Can I look at my speedrunner.com profile
Oh,
real
sure,
quick?
yeah. I know
Is that
you have a huge list, so
yeah?
can't remember everything.
All right. Talked about that one. Talked about that one. Oh, I've run SMB3, I guess.
Okay. That's
yeah, that was actually the post Big 20 run that I ended up doing or last year. So in 2020, I didn't end up running any of the games that I learned for any longer. But last year, I was like, okay, I want to run SMB3 like some more because I ended up liking how the movement felt. So the category that was in the 20 was any percent no wrong work, but on a ROM hack called Speedrunners Edition that
yeah.
basically removes a lot of RNG elements and also allows other scrollers to be played like a regular level. That was pretty fun. I decided to throw all of that out of the window and just run vanilla. I got a 1056 by the end of it.
Oh, well,
Pretty
you
happy
need
with
to,
that. Not touching that category ever again. It's so cursed.
you don't like their hands, do you?
No.
Yeah.
Like I was fine with the auto scrollers. I was not fine with the hands.
No,
It really is reminiscent about like some of my moments with Castlevania where you're just throwing attempts at the game and then it's just, well, I can't wait to see how many hands I'm getting this time.
And then, yeah, if you
So,
have a top time like that, you literally
yeah.
have to get 0, and that's a 1 in 8. So it's like, well,
Yeah, once you get like a low 11, you start requiring 0 hands. So,
yeah, I have a 1049, and so that's going like a step
nice.
above just getting no hands. It's like, oh.
Yeah. You start trying to grind for no hands and then also like getting a pretty darn clean run.
It's ugh. And when you get to a point, you have to worry about the RNG and like how the bro moves in World 1 on the overworld and stuff.
Oh yeah, because that can give or take a few seconds.
Apparently you tried to do the Mario 1-1-2 clip for fun and got it? What is
Yeah,
this
well,
about?
it took more than a few attempts. I think it took like 15 minutes. I mean, I used the practice hack that tells you exactly what inputs you have to press
Oh,
when.
the Pelson ROM with the
Yeah,
scenario section. Yeah, okay.
that one.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't look up any tutorials. I just loaded that. I just loaded that up, save state before 1-2, and then I just let the ROM hack guide me. That was pretty inspiring. Like just being able to pick up a ROM hack and have the ROM hack guide you instead of having to look up any tutorials was
Hmm.
um, definitely something that I think more ROM hacks could introduce.
Yeah, that's a 455 trick. So,
Yeah,
uh, you usually don't need to learn that for a long ass time.
indeed.
So, I mean,
I thought about like maybe running SMB1 for like sub 5 or maybe a bit more at some point, but
you
still
could
haven't felt
probably
the
get
kick.
sub 5 in a day. Knowing your history. People have done
Maybe.
it in a day. I know Nicrovita's done it in a day.
Ah, nice.
So it's definitely possible, especially it'd just be easier if you have experience with NES and that kind of stuff. And sub 5 doesn't require any frame perfect thing. There's a 2-frame
Right,
trick at
yeah.
the end, but I mean,
Yeah, you go for
that's
the
easy.
easier wall jump, right?
Yeah, nice easy 2-frame setup, 2-frame is
Right.
easy. Especially if you have Castlevania experience where everything's this frame perfect nonsense. So,
Yeah.
Mario 1 probably be very similar, and if you want to go
I
top
have
level
kind of,
with the amount of frame perfects are in it.
I have thought about this. Like, obviously, I have no experience in running Mario 1 at the top level, but I do wonder just how similar it is to Castlevania because it really does feel like I'm reciting over these like really difficult tricks over and over.
Yeah, I
And
know
it
there's a
just,
couple Mario 1 runners that have done Castlevania. I don't know their level at the game, but like there's
I
some
know,
sort of crossover there.
I think the one I know is Crimson.
Yes, yeah,
Cool. Yeah,
heard that.
he has a pretty good time. I think like a 1-4x maybe,
Friends.
or sorry, 11-4x.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, especially for no scroll glitch, right? So that's
Mhm.
I don't know like what the skill levels are with the times because when you get to top level in that game, like saving a second isn't huge. So
Yeah, I'd say I'd say that's I'd say that's around mid high level, I
mid high.
suppose.
All right. I mean, wow. So like, is sub 12 like the sub 5?
Again, I have no direct comparison in terms
Yeah,
of
I
like
guess that's a
how
hard
they
thing.
compare in terms of difficulty. I would, there is someone who got a sub 12 in one day. Cool kid.
Well,
He's,
okay.
the, I think, he's the only one so far who managed to get a sub 12 in Castlevania in a single day.
I mean, it's cool, kids. So I'm
Yeah,
not surprised, but uh, I forgot he did like top level Castlevania. He has an 1120 something, right? So
yeah. He has an 11:28, and that was before scroll glitches. I think his time was maybe like top 5. I want to say back then. Like he
yeah,
got good really quick. That is for sure.
that's cool, kid, for you. But
Mm-mm.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Right.
I still need to beat the game casually, but it's definitely a very interesting run, the Castlevania games, especially on NES, which is what I focus on more since I'm a retro nerd. So
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you find it interesting. I wouldn't say it's like for everyone because I mean, it's probably like how SMB1 isn't for everyone, right? It's like a bit of a simpler game. Movement options are more basic than you'd find in some other games, but
mhm.
I do feel like there's quite a big variety of tricks that could keep you interested, particularly if you're like more interested in uh, complicated details in how some stuff works at in how some stuff works at a technical level. Like a small 3-second section where it doesn't seem like there's much happening could actually end up having a lot of information packed into it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I know there's a correlation between like NES short run movement options aren't that huge, and then so many frame perfects.
Yep.
So no,
the
one and the
more the
same.
more the more around the more around is like short, the more it gets optimized, and then when it gets
Mhm.
optimized, people start going for like stupid tricks, and
And
that's
then,
that's kind of how it goes.
oh yeah. Um, but yeah, anything else that we didn't, any other games we didn't dive too far into?
Okay. Shoutouts to Draken. That is a Super Nintendo game that a friend of mine got me into. I ran it just a few days before I got my world record in Donkey Kong Country 2 in 2020. So I like to attribute this game to a bit of blessing.
I see. I see.
It's a scuffed RPG.
Okay.
It's
The best kind. The best
yeah,
kind.
it's so this is a game that was originally made by a French studio that got translated into Japanese and then back to English.
Oh,
It's about as broken as it sounds.
yeah.
Um, I guess this is what you'd call an action RPG nowadays, where like you've got stats and different characters, but then you got random encounters and you can move your characters around and kind of attack them, and like you can miss or enemies can miss, and it feels like a funny run. It's hard to it's a magical experience. It's hard to describe. Just like watch it.
Okay. Fair enough.
But yeah, I think I had second place or third place when I ran it, and now I'm sixth. Because more people ran it. Red and Blue first speed game. I want to run Red glitchless more at some point. Just get more experience with RPGs. That would be, I think, a pretty interesting experience. Like just traditional, well, as traditional as Pokemon games are in terms of Japanese RPGs, but
Yeah.
you get what I mean. Talked about the Messenger. Nightmare Busters is a game that Lucha Jim got me into. I've played that on co-op at ESA. A fun experience. Nice running gun. 12-hour challenge for Super Ghosts and Ghosts. Mario 64. I did a 16-hour challenge. I have a 26:45. Very hot. Okay, Moonlaw, which is a game that nobody knows about. And it's this game that's on Steam for free. That a friend of mine found once, and then we kind of ran it for fun, and we traded records back and forth. And then we thought, it would be funny to host a break the record event for this game. So we sat down for 5 hours on a restream with Mr. Dino of GG Speedruns fame, and we just kind of took this game too seriously. Also, we think it might mine bitcoins in the background. Not really, but
Oh, I see.
okay. So the deal with that game is that sometimes whenever you respawn too many times at a checkpoint, the game slows down for some reason. And I dug into the game files, and there's a file called crypto.dll.
Oh.
That file, I'm pretty sure, is responsible for encrypting and decrypting files. So just an unfortunate name. Okay, I ran some Big 20 games, Ninja Gaiden, Chip and Dale, Contra. Die Hard was a game that Lucha Jim taught me at ESA, 2-minute run, very simple to learn. I ran Final Fantasy 80%. It's this run where you I've never played Final Fantasy past this speed run, but you start the game, you name your characters a very specific way, because that's going to be code that's going to be executed later. Then you go to the starting area, you go up and down a staircase 32 times, you open the menu, and you warp to the credits. Boom.
What? Okay.
Extremely simple run. I ran it for 2 hours. I have a 142, which is 9th place somehow. So if you ever want like an extremely easy to run to learn, Final Fantasy 80% seems like a pretty good candidate.
Alright.
Okay. There's another game that someone called Lucent got me into that's called Hokuto no Ken 3 Shinseki Sozo Seiken Retsuden. I think I pronounced that correctly. I barely know the game. Again, I barely played this with beyond the 80% route, because it's this game that has a wrong warp that gets you to the end of the game. I ran it for a few hours. I have a 117, was for record at the time. Somebody else beat it. SME3 Speedrunner Edition. Oh, I have a hot world record in Home Alone.
Of course. The
Very impressive.
1958. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I think I covered all the games that I've run.
Mm,
Looking
there we
at my
go.
speedrun.com profile.
The full history. There you go. We got there. Only a couple game.
Oh, I also ran the Mike Tyson aisle in Mike Tyson's Punch Out. I have
Oh,
a 243, I think, maybe
what?
246.
Oh,
Let me
okay.
see.
I've,
243. Okay. Yeah, I got multiple round 1000s. That was actually
oh,
a second freebie that I had in 2020 because Mike Tyson's Punch Out is one of my favorite NES games, and honestly, it's a wonder that I haven't run it already. But in around 2019, 2019, I just started doing the Tyson fight. It's actually extremely easy to learn. It's just that there's a lot of frame perfect punches that you need to nail. But like conceptually, this is an extremely simple fight. I got around 1000 in 2019, and then it was a freebie doing the Big 20. Ended up lowering my time during the Big 20, thanks to
mm,
that. So I have a 243 on Tyson. I was actually, I think, the only person during the Big 20 who ended up getting around one fight. That saved me a minute.
ah,
So that's good.
it's
I
funny.
hope to run Mike Tyson's Punch Out one day because that run. I mean, I don't know how fun it is to run at a high level because it seems like it does seem like it might be like a
It's an
bit of a
RNG
boring RNG
first.
grind at
Yeah.
some point. But I would love to like learn how to execute and kind of flowchart across the different fights. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that's on my list as well. I put a lot of work into Tyson actually, which is funny
Oh,
because I've only round one him once and it's my 257. So
nice.
so now I feel like I have a skill issue. But oh
I
well.
think my first run one might have been a 257 as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it would have been left at that if it wasn't for the Big 20.
Oh,
Uh,
there you go.
I ended up getting a better time.
You might have been PB buddies for a little bit then.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, that game's fun. I've worked on some of the other ILs. Like I have a really good Great Tiger fight without the like optimal strategy, and then
Gotcha.
I I I have the King Hippo. You can tie the task if you get like this perfect RNG, and I did, but I was like barely slow, so I have the decimal increment above it. So very sad.
Nice. So you probably know how to run Mike Tyson's Punch Out more optimally than I do. So Mike Tyson's was a game in the last Big 20 as well, but it was um what was it? Another World Circuit? What was it called?
Oh, another
And
World
it was
Circuit. Yeah,
RTA.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it
That's
was
where you
just five
do.
fights. I think from King Hippo, Soda, Great Tiger. No, King Hippo, Great Tiger, then Soda, then no, I think it's King Hippo, then Piston Honda, then Soda.
Oh, interesting.
No, King Hippo, then Great Tiger, then Piston Honda, then Soda, then Bol Bol 2. Okay, that's the five fights that I learned. And I
I
also
see.
learned RTA strategies for them. So, for example, I did this extremely easy strat on Piston Honda where you get you get a KO on the Piston Charge or whatever it's called.
Yeah, at the 1 minute mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I forget about another World Circuit and how it works, but yeah, I've done like the first few, I guess. Trying to remember. Oh yeah, I did submit a run. It's like this 40-minute. It's really bad, but it was funny because I just like I knew how to do a couple of the early fights. I booted up the game and just said, "Can I beat this?" And I 14 and 0 first try. So it's like, well, I have to
Nice.
submit this. This is funny. It was just funny because I went to round 3 in Tyson and I didn't know what to do
Oh,
past round like two and a half.
yeah, I definitely can see why you'd submit that.
So I was like, yep. So yeah, I'd like to beat that by like 20 minutes. We'll see how that goes
Mhm.
in the future. But I mean, yeah, that I've been watching that game. That was one of the first games I started watching a lot of when I joined speedrunning. So yeah, super interested in that as well.
Yep. And
So
obviously agree.
yeah,
I found this game extremely interesting.
I guess I'll see where we are in a few years.
Yeah. But by that point, I might have run it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it sounds like we covered everything. Yeah, if there's something in your history we didn't go over that's interesting, you can
Uh,
think about it.
Can't really think about more. I think I've kind of gone over my history of my career as a speedrunner. That's kind of who I am, what I've done,
There you
my
go.
whole curriculum.
Well, I'll leave this time open to any chat questions if there's any, and you can self-promote to your liking.
Check out. Obviously, I've promoted this already. Check out the video I made recently on the scroll glitch in Castlevania. Very happy with it. I think it. I hope it's interesting.
I thought so.
And then I stream very often on Twitch, right here. Currently trying to go after the world record in Castlevania 80%.
Yep. I'm trying to
Kinda
get
where
the
I'm at.
shout out command, but my F key is broken. But I made it work. I just had to spell it wrong and then autocorrect, and then there you go. Yeah, my F key just doesn't work. So I can't pay respects anymore since F doesn't work. Oh well. But yeah, yeah, if there are no questions and self promotion is done, we can wrap things up here, I guess. So yeah, thanks for watching the stream. Follow, you know what to do. I should hope. Be on YouTube later today if you're watching live. If you're watching YouTube, watch these live. It's fun. You can ask questions. It's important stuff. But yeah,
On that note, shout outs to Twitch for removing the 24-hour limit on VOD exclusivity, because previously you were supposed to wait 24 hours after you streamed something to upload it to YouTube, but last year they removed it.
oh,
Very happy with that change.
I never listened to that. Anyway, I'm glad they were. I actually thought it. I thought it was still in
definitely
play.
wasn't universally followed. So
I thought that was
yeah.
still in play. I thought I was just breaking the
that's
rules
gone.
intentionally. Okay,
That is gone.
that's a weight off my shoulders. Well, thank goodness for that. All right. Well, we're not getting banned yet. Let's go.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, all right. Let's not conjure up something negative here. Whoops. Anyway, all right. Thanks for watching, everyone. You know where to watch more. You know when to watch more too. It's in the name.
Indeed, happy to have been here. This was fun.
Thanks so much for coming on. Good discussion, I think. So, but yeah, take care, everyone. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.
Bye bye.